You wake before the first light reaches the eastern horizon, although calling it light feels generous. The sky is a deep shade of blue-grey, and the stars still sparkle above the frozen land. Cold air slips beneath your fur blanket and touches your face with surprising sharpness. Your breath rises in pale clouds that disappear almost as quickly as they form. Around you, the rest of your small band stirs, slowly, each person reluctant to leave the small circle of warmth left by the night's fire. This is Ice Age Europe, nearly 50,000 years before cities, kingdoms, or even farming. Winter is not simply another season here. It is a force that shapes every decision, every journey, and every hope for tomorrow. The silence feels enormous. Only the gentle crackle of glowing embers interrupts the stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls across the valley. The sound echoes over frozen grass and snow-covered hills before fading into the endless morning. You sit upright, pulling a thick reindeer hide over your shoulders. The fur feels rough but comforting against your skin. The smell of smoke has settled into every piece of clothing you own. It clings to your hair, your hands, and even the leather cord wrapped around your wrist. Smoke is more than an unpleasant scent. It is reassurance. If you smell smoke, the fire still lives. Outside the shelter, the landscape stretches farther than your eyes can comfortably follow. Rolling plains disappear beneath thin blankets of snow. Clusters of pine and birch trees stand against the wind like determined survivors. Beyond them, distant glaciers glimmer beneath the early dawn, their massive white walls reflecting faint hints of pink from the approaching sunrise. The world looks beautiful. It also wants you, wants you dead. That may sound unnecessarily dramatic, but Ice Age Europe was remarkably unforgiving. Temperatures during winter often remained well below freezing for weeks at a time, especially across central and northern regions. Wind sweeping south from enormous ice sheets made already cold days feel even harsher. Survival depended less upon strength than careful preparation and constant cooperation. You know this without needing anyone to explain it. An older woman kneels beside the fire, gently separating glowing coals with a carved antler tool. She adds tiny pieces of dry wood before placing larger branches across them. Flames slowly awaken again. Nobody cheers. This is simply another successful morning. Historians generally agree that prehistoric communities invested tremendous effort into preserving fire, because creating it from scratch demanded both skill and valuable resources. Yet researchers continue debating exactly how frequently different Ice Age groups could reliably produce new fire, rather than preserve existing flames for weeks or months. The evidence leaves room for more than one possibility. Either way, losing the fire would have been disastrous. Nearby, two children carefully scrape frost from animal skins hanging beside the shelter entrance. They work with surprising seriousness despite their young age. One occasionally smiles at the other, but neither treats the task as a game. Childhood arrives differently here. Play still exists, certainly. Laughter survives every age of humanity. Yet even simple activities quietly prepare young people for responsibilities they will someday carry. Every hide properly cleaned today becomes warmer clothing tomorrow. The wind suddenly changes. You notice it immediately because everyone notices it. It carries a sharper bite now, along with the faint scent of fresh snow somewhere beyond the hills. The oldest hunter lifts his head without saying a word. He studies distant clouds gathering over the western horizon. Nobody ignores this. Long before weather forecast satellites or written calendars, people observe subtle changes in wind direction, cloud shape and animal behavior with extraordinary attention. Their lives depended upon reading nature's smallest warnings. A single overlooked storm could trap an entire hunting party miles from shelter. You quietly wonder whether snow will arrive before sunset. Nobody answers. No one can. A group leaves camp carrying long wooden spears tipped with carefully shaped stone points. They are not planning a grand hunt today. Instead, they hope to locate fresh animal tracks before deeper snowfall covers them completely. Fresh footprints matter. Old ones waste energy. Every step through snow burns precious calories, and food remains uncertain throughout winter. Hunting is never guaranteed regardless of experience. Some days, skilled hunters return carrying enough meat for everyone. Other days, they return with only stories about distant herds disappearing beyond another frozen ridge. That uncertainty follows every meal. Archaeological discoveries suggest that people living during this period hunted a remarkable variety of animals, including reindeer horses, bison, red deer, ibex, and occasionally mammoths. While mammoths capture modern imagination, they probably were not everyday meals for every community. Many groups relied far more often upon medium-sized game that could be hunted with greater consistency. Still, imagining mammoths never gets old. Enormous shaggy silhouettes, sometimes appeared along distant valleys, moving slowly beneath falling snow like living hills. Seeing one was unforgettable. Hunting one was another matter entirely. Some scholars even question how frequently mammoths were actively hunted versus opportunistically scavenged after natural deaths. Archaeological evidence continues to fuel lively debate, reminding us that much of Ice Age life remains beautifully incomplete. The morning slowly brightens. Weak sunlight finally reaches the valley floor, though it offers almost no warmth. Tiny crystals scattered across frozen grass sparkle briefly before disappearing beneath shifting shadows. Your hands ache. Even through thick fur gloves, cold gradually seeps into your fingers. You rub them together while collecting dry branches stored beneath a rock overhang. The wood feels surprisingly light after weeks of careful drying near smoke. Everything requires planning. Nothing is accidental. Firewood during winter demands memory. People learned which trees produced hotter fires, which branches stayed dry beneath heavy snow, and where hidden supplies could be stored away from moisture. Every successful decision quietly increased tomorrow's chances. The smell of roasting marrow begins drifting across camp. Someone has placed cracked bones beside the fire, allowing rich fat to melt slowly into a shallow stone bowl. The aroma instantly draws curious children closer. Fat means warmth. Fat means strength. During Ice Age winters, animal fat became one of the most valuable foods available. Modern nutrition confirms its importance for people living in extremely cold environments where enormous energy demands required calorie-rich diets far beyond what many of us would expect today. Breakfast remained simple. 4 pieces of roasted meat, warm marrow, perhaps a few preserved berries gathered months earlier. No spices, no bread, no sweet desserts waiting afterward. Yet every bite carries meaning because every bite represents another successful day already won. As afternoon approaches, clouds continue thickening across the western sky. Ravens circle lower than before. Even distant reindeer seem restless, slowly drifting toward sheltered valleys. Nature whispers first. It rarely shouts without warning. You help reinforce the shelter by tightening leather bindings around mammoth bones supporting the roof. Thick hides stretch overhead, blocking much of the icy wind. Inside darkness arrives earlier than outside, but warmth lingers longer. The shelter smells of leather, smoke-damp earth, and human life. It feels safe. Safe enough. No shelter remains perfect forever. Eventually hides wear thin. Bones crack. Wind discovers tiny openings where cold quietly slips inside. Constant repair becomes another rhythm of existence, as ordinary as eating or sleeping. Evening comes quickly. The pale winter sun barely climbs before beginning its descent once again. Long shadows spread across the valley until nearly everything becomes blue. Firelight grows brighter. Voices soften. Someone begins telling a familiar story. Perhaps it describes an ancient hunt. Perhaps it explains strange stars. Perhaps it remembers someone who survived a terrible winter decades earlier. No written words preserve these stories. Only memory does. You listen carefully because stories carry more than entertainment. They preserve routes across mountains, dangerous rivers, successful hunting grounds, unusual animal behavior, and lessons paid for with real hardship. Knowledge travels through voices. As darkness finally settles across Ice Age Europe, snowflakes begin drifting silently from the sky. The first true winter storm has arrived. No one panics. They simply move a little closer together around the fire-trusting preparation experience and one another against the immense frozen wilderness waiting beyond the glow of the flames. Section 2. Morning arrives quietly after the storm. You notice it first through the strange silence outside the shelter. Fresh snow has swallowed the usual sounds of the valley. Even the wind seems softer, as though the entire landscape has wrapped itself beneath a thick white blanket. Tiny flakes still drift lazily through the pale air, catching what little sunlight reaches the ground. The world looks untouched. It is not. Every fresh snowfall hides yesterday's tracks, buries useful firewood, and changes familiar paths into uncertain ground. Winter is always rewriting the landscape, and you must learn to read its newest version every single day. You crawl carefully from beneath your fur coverings. The cold greets you immediately. It slips through the entrance of the shelter like an invisible visitor, biting your cheeks and filling your lungs with air, so crisp it almost stings. The smell of damp snow mixes with lingering smoke from last night's fire, creating an oddly comforting scent that has become the fragrance of home. Home is a generous word. There are no permanent villages here, no stone houses, no sturdy wooden walls. Instead, home is whatever shelter your people can build well enough to survive another winter. You step outside and immediately see everyone already working. Nobody waits for instruction. An older man is brushing heavy snow from the roof using a long pine branch. Two women inspect the leather coverings stretched across the frame, searching for places where moisture might seep inside once temperatures rise slightly during daylight. A teenager tightens rawhide cords around one of the great curved mammoth ribs supporting the entrance. Every hand has a purpose. Even the youngest children carry bundles of dry grass gathered before the snowfall. Modern archaeologists have uncovered remarkable evidence suggesting that Ice Age people built surprisingly sophisticated shelters in many regions of Europe. While caves certainly provided valuable protection when available, countless groups also constructed temporary homes using mammoth bones, wooden poles, antlers, hides and woven vegetation. Some sites discovered in Eastern Europe even reveal circular dwellings built almost entirely from mammoth skeletons. The idea sounds extraordinary, yet it makes perfect sense. A mammoth offered far more than meat. Its enormous bones became beams, its tusks formed arches, its thick hide blocked icy winds, its sinew tied structures together. Very little went to waste. Historians generally agree that resourcefulness defined Ice Age survival, though researchers still debate how common mammoth bone houses actually were across Europe. Some believe they were concentrated in specific regions where mammoth remains were abundant, while others suggest wooden structures may have been far more widespread than archaeological evidence currently reveals. Wood disappears, bones endure. That simple fact shapes what survives beneath the soil. You kneel beside several long poles lying partially buried beneath fresh snow. Yesterday they were ordinary branches. Today they have become essential repairs. Together with another member of your band, you lift one carefully into place along the outer wall of the shelter. The wood feels icy against your gloves despite the thick fur lining. Your fingers quickly grow numb anyway. Cold always finds a way. Rawhide strips soaked earlier to make them flexible are wrapped tightly around the joints. As they freeze again, they shrink slightly, gripping the frame even more securely. It is elegant engineering, without mathematics, without blueprints, without written instructions. Only experience passes carefully from one generation to the next. Nearby, an elderly woman quietly watches your work. She rarely interrupts. When she finally speaks, her advice is brief. Tighter, nothing more. You adjust the binding. She nods once. Approval here comes quietly. Knowledge belongs to everyone because survival depends upon sharing it. A poorly tied shelter wall affects the entire group, not merely the individual responsible. In this frozen world, cooperation often proves stronger than physical strength alone. The wind shifts again. Loose snow dances across the open plain in thin white ribbons. Far beyond camp, you notice dark shapes moving slowly across the valley. Reindeer, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Their migration continues despite the weather, each animal searching for patches where food remains accessible beneath the snow. You watch them for several moments before returning to work. Winter never pauses, neither can you. Inside the shelter, the difference in temperature feels almost magical. Not warm, simply less cold. That small difference means everything. A central fire pit glows steadily beneath an opening, left intentionally in the roof, allowing smoke to escape while preserving precious heat. Around the edges of the shelter lie sleeping places lined with dried grasses, moss, and layers of animal hides. The ground itself has been covered wherever possible to reduce contact with frozen earth. Every detail matters. Even sleeping directly upon bare ground can steal dangerous amounts of body heat during long winter nights. Modern experiments using reconstructed prehistoric shelters demonstrate something fascinating. Properly insulated, hide-covered structures can retain significantly more warmth than many people expect, especially when occupied by several individuals whose body heat contributes naturally to the interior temperature. People become part of the shelter. Quite literally, you help spread another layer of dried grasses beneath the sleeping area. The grasses release a faint earthy smell, reminding you of warmer months now, many weeks behind. Tiny seeds still cling to some of the stalks, though they hold little value this late in the season. Memory lingers, even in dried plants. A child crawls beneath a heavy fur blanket and laughs. His mother smiles, just briefly. Moments of joy appear unexpectedly here, often during ordinary work rather than grand celebrations. Someone slips on packed snow. Another tells an amusing story about a fox stealing dried meat during the previous winter. Laughter rises around the fire before disappearing into the steady rhythm of daily tasks. Life continues, not despite hardship, alongside it. The smell of fresh hide fills the shelter. Several hunters returned weeks earlier, with a young bison whose skin is only now ready for use after careful scraping, stretching, smoking and drying. You run your hand across its rough surface. It feels strong, flexible, ready to face another season. Preparing hides demands remarkable patience. Fat must be removed, flesh carefully scraped away, the skin stretched evenly to prevent shrinking. Smoke from slow fires helps preserve it while adding resistance against moisture and insects. Nothing happens quickly. Everything rewards patience. Historians know prehistoric people mastered hide preparation to an impressive degree, though scholars continue discussing exactly which tanning techniques existed 50,000 years ago. Some evidence hints at the use of animal brains, fats, smoke and plant materials, but many details remain uncertain because organic processes rarely leave complete archaeological traces. The mystery survives, much like the people themselves once did. Outside clouds begin breaking apart. Pale sunlight spills across the snowy valley. Ice crystals glitter everywhere. The landscape suddenly appears almost beautiful enough to forget its danger. Almost. A young hunter points towards several fresh tracks crossing the open ground. Not reindeer, not horse. Wolf. The prints are large. Recent. Everyone notices without alarm. Predators belong here just as much as humans do. Still, the shelter receives another careful inspection before darkness returns. Openings are sealed. Extra firewood is stacked nearby. Stone tools are placed within easy reach. Preparedness becomes habit. As afternoon slowly fades, smoke curls gently upward into the icy sky. Ravens perch upon distant trees, watching the camp with patient intelligence. Somewhere far away, a mammoth trumpets across the frozen plain, its deep call rolling through the valley like distant thunder. The sound lingers, then fades. Inside the shelter, evening settles peacefully. The fire glows brighter against growing darkness. Warm light flickers across mammoth bones, supporting the roof, casting long shadows that seem almost alive. You wrap your fur cloak tighter and listen to the soft crackling of burning pine. Outside, winter stretches endlessly. Inside, human ingenuity holds it back. Not forever, just for one more precious night. Tomorrow the wind may change again. Another storm may arrive. A hunting party may return with great success or with empty hands. No one can know. But tonight your shelter stands firm against the frozen world, built not only from bonewood, hide and stone, but also from countless generations of quiet wisdom earned one difficult winter at a time. Section 3. The fire is still alive. That is the first thing you notice before your eyes fully open. A faint orange glow pulses gently through the darkness of the shelter, throwing soft light across mammoth, bones, stretched hides and sleeping faces. Outside, another long winter night continues, but inside this small circle of warmth, life has held its ground for one more night. You quietly exhale. Relief arrives every morning before breakfast. The embers are never taken for granted. One member of the band has remained awake for part of the night, feeding the fire little by little, rather than all at once. Large logs are too valuable to burn carelessly. Small branches, dry twigs, and carefully split pieces of pine have been added at measured intervals, each chosen to keep steady heat instead of dramatic flames. The fire breathes slowly, much like the people around it. Its crackling becomes part of the night's soundtrack, joining the occasional whistle of wind slipping around the shelter and the distant groan of ice somewhere beyond the valley. Every familiar sound brings comfort because unfamiliar sounds deserve attention. A loud crack outside. Everyone listens. Nothing follows. Conversation resumes in whispers. Maintaining a fire through an Ice Age winter is not simply about staying warm, it is about preserving the center of daily life. Around these flames, meals are prepared, tools are repaired, hides are softened, children are taught, injuries are treated, and stories are remembered. The fire is your kitchen, your workshop, your classroom, your safest companion. Archaeologists have discovered countless prehistoric hearths scattered across Europe, many containing layers of ash accumulated over repeated occupations. These ancient fireplaces often reveal burned bone fragments, charcoal from different tree species, and carefully arranged stones that helped contain heat. The ashes tell stories, even after 50,000 years. You kneel beside the hearth while an older woman gently lifts a blackened stone from the edge using 2 pieces of antler. The rock radiates surprising warmth despite the freezing air beyond the shelter. She smiles faintly. Still good. The stone returns to the fire. Nothing useful is wasted. Wood is especially precious now. During warmer months, collecting fallen branches is almost routine. Winter changes everything. Snow buries much of the forest floor, while moisture hides inside many fallen trees, making them difficult to ignite. Dry wood gathered during autumn has become part of the community's winter savings. Every stick represents planning. Every bundle reflects foresight. You remember helping gather these branches weeks ago, carrying them across frozen ground while daylight still lingered longer. At the time, the work seemed endless. Now it feels wise. Outside, one hunter prepares to leave before sunrise. Not to hunt, to gather wood. He carries a stone axe, several leather cords, and a woven carrying frame strapped across his shoulders. 2 companions join him. Nobody travels alone if it can be avoided. The forest changes after snowfall. Old landmarks disappear beneath white drifts. Fallen trees hide beneath powder. Frozen streams become difficult to distinguish from ordinary ground. Nature enjoys disguises. The 3 figures soon vanish into the pale morning mists. Inside, someone gently stirs a pot-shaped hollow carved into stone. Small pieces of marrow-rich bone simmer in heated water using fire-warmed rocks dropped carefully into the liquid. Steam rises slowly, filling the shelter with the rich smell of roasted fat and cooked meat. The aroma is comforting, simple, deeply familiar. Some researchers believe prehistoric people frequently used hot stones to heat water before durable ceramic pottery became widespread many thousands of years later. While direct evidence remains incomplete, experiments show that carefully heated rocks can successfully bring water close to boiling inside skin bags, wooden containers, or carved stone basins. Historians continue debating exactly how common these methods were across different regions. Organic containers rarely survive the passage of tens of thousands of years, leaving archaeologists with fascinating possibilities rather than complete certainty. Much of prehistory whispers, it rarely speaks loudly. As the meal cooks, another task begins. Stone tools are placed near the fire, not because they need warmth, because the people using them do. Cold fingers work poorly. A young man carefully reshapes the edge of a flint scraper with short controlled strikes from an antler hammer. Tiny flakes scatter across a hide laid beneath his work. Each movement appears almost effortless, though it reflects years of practice. You watch closely. Flint remembers mistakes. Strike too hard and the tool shatters. Strike too softly and nothing changes. Precision matters. The scraper will soon prepare more hide, smoothing away stubborn tissue before smoking and drying can begin. Every finished skin eventually becomes clothing, bedding, shelter, or carrying bags. One tool supports many lives. Children gather nearby, pretending to imitate the movements with pieces of ordinary stone. Nobody laughs at them. Learning begins through watching. Long before classrooms existed, observation served as humanity's greatest teacher. Skills passed quietly from experienced hands to curious eyes. A child might spend years simply watching before attempting certain techniques independently. Knowledge grows deep, grow slowly. Like a fire, an older hunter reaches into a leather pouch hanging beside the shelter wall. Inside rests something unexpectedly valuable. Dry fungus, carefully preserved. It has been collected from trees during warmer months and stored away from moisture. Certain fungi catch sparks remarkably well, making them useful for nurturing fragile flames into stronger fires. Other materials wait beside it. Dried grasses, fine strips of bark, soft moss, everything has its purpose. Historians know prehistoric communities used a remarkable variety of natural tinder materials, although identifying specific species remains challenging because delicate plant remains seldom survive in archaeological sites. Nature offered many options. People learned them all. Outside clouds part briefly. Weak sunlight enters the shelter through the smoke opening, illuminating floating dust and tiny particles of ash dancing in the warm air. The scene feels peaceful, almost sacred. For several quiet moments, nobody. Only the fire does. Its gentle rhythm slows everyone's breathing. Perhaps this is one reason hearths became emotional centers as well as practical ones. Across cultures separated by thousands of years, people repeatedly gathered around flames not only for survival but also for companionship. Warmth invites conversation. Darkness encourages listening. As afternoon approaches, the wood-gathering party returns. They carry less than hoped. Fresh snow has buried many fallen branches while others remain too damp to burn efficiently. Still they smile. They found enough. Enough is often victory. The gathered wood is immediately sorted. Thin branches for starting flames. Dense hardwood for lasting heat. Small splinters for delicate work. Nothing is piled carelessly. Every piece has a future. One hunter quietly reveals another discovery from the forest. A hollow tree, still standing, filled with dry wood protected from snow. The entire group nods with satisfaction. They will return there another day when supplies begin running low. Nobody marks the location on pair. Memory will have to suffice. As evening settles over the valley, the fire grows brighter once more. Shadows stretch across the shelter walls. Fur blankets catch the dancing light. Smoke curls gently upward through the roof opening before disappearing into the freezing night. Outside wolves begin howling, far away. The sound rises and falls across the snow-covered landscape. The children pause, then continue eating. The adults listen carefully, not fearfully. Distance matters. Experience teaches the difference between nearby danger and ordinary wilderness. Still another log is placed upon the fire, not merely for warmth, for reassurance. Flames push back darkness in ways no spear ever could. As the night deepens, one by one members of the band settle beneath heavy hides. Someone quietly adds another handful of glowing embers together, before covering part of the fire with ash, allowing it to burn slowly until morning. The flames grow smaller, never gone. Sleeping beside a living fire means trusting tomorrow will begin with light already waiting. In this frozen world, that small orange glow is more than heat. It is memory. It is hope. It is proof that even against the endless winter of Ice Age Europe, careful hands, shared knowledge, and patient hearts can keep the darkness just far enough away for another day to begin. Section 4. Morning comes without colour. The sky outside your shelter is a soft blanket of pale grey, and the sun hides somewhere beyond layers of winter cloud. Light slowly fills the valley, but warmth never follows. Frost clings to every branch, every stone, and every strand of dried grass peeking through the snow. You stretch carefully. Your muscles feel stiff after another night spent sleeping on layered hides above frozen ground. Even with a well-built shelter and a dependable fire, winter always leaves its mark upon your body. The cold is patient. It never truly leaves. You pull your outer fur cloak around your shoulders before stepping outside. The heavy reindeer hide settles comfortably across your back, and the soft inner fur traps the warmth your body has worked so hard to create. Without these layers, you would last only a short time in the bitter wind. Clothing is survival. Modern people often think of prehistoric clothing as little more than rough animal skins thrown loosely over the body. The reality was almost certainly far more sophisticated. 50,000 years ago, people living in Ice Age Europe had already developed practical methods for shaping, softening, stitching and layering hides into garments designed for remarkably cold conditions. They understood winter. Winter forced them to. Several members of your band are already working beside the shelter entrance. A large reindeer hide has been stretched tightly between wooden stakes driven into the frozen ground. One woman kneels beside it, holding a beautifully polished stone scraper. With slow, steady movements, she removes the last traces of fat and connective tissue. The work is repetitive, quiet, almost meditative. Tiny curls of pale material gather beside her knees, while a faint smell of fresh leather drifts through the cold air. Ravens watch curiously from nearby trees, occasionally hopping closer before deciding the humans remain too busy to notice. They are wrong. Everyone notices ravens. Their intelligence has earned respect for countless generations. You kneel nearby, taking another scraper from a leather pouch. The stone edge feels surprisingly smooth, where hundreds of careful hands have held similar tools before yours. I begin working beside her, not because anyone orders you, because everyone understands the task. Fresh hides cannot simply be worn immediately after a successful hunt. Moisture trapped inside them freezes quickly, making the skin stiff and uncomfortable. Left untreated, they begin to decay long before spring arrives. Preparation takes time, sometimes many days, sometimes weeks. Once scraped clean, hides must be stretched evenly, smoked over gentle fires, rubbed repeatedly with fats, and softened through constant bending and pulling. The process demands patience. Patience often saves lives. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of stone scrapers from Middle and Upper Paleolithic sites across Europe. Many display microscopic wear patterns consistent with hide preparation, providing strong evidence that clothing production occupied a significant portion of daily life during Ice Age winters. The tools survived. The clothing did not. Leather, fur, sinew, and woven fibers rarely endure for tens of thousands of years, leaving scientists to reconstruct ancient wardrobes from indirect clues. Historians generally agree that Ice Age clothing was surprisingly effective, but they continue debating exactly how tailored many garments became. Some researchers argue for simple wrapped hides, while others suggest fitted jackets, leggings, boots, and even hooded garments stitched with remarkable precision. The truth may lie somewhere between. You look toward one of the oldest hunters. His clothing tells its own story. Layers of different furs overlap across his chest. A thick wolf pelt forms an outer cloak, while softer reindeer fur lines the inside. Narrow strips of leather bind the garment around his waist without restricting movement. Fur leggings disappear into boots wrapped tightly with rawhide cords. Nothing matches. Everything belongs. Beauty here comes from usefulness. Nearby, an elderly woman sits with a bundle of long animal sinews drying beside the fire. Yesterday they were tendons. Today they are thread. She carefully separates each strand using a sharpened bone tool before twisting them into remarkably strong cords. Her fingers move with practiced confidence despite years of hard work etched into every wrinkle. No motion is wasted. The sinew feels surprisingly smooth once prepared. When dampened slightly, it becomes flexible enough to pass through tiny holes punched into leather using slender bone awls. As it dries again, it contracts, creating exceptionally tight seams capable of keeping out bitter wind. Nature provides. Human ingenuity completes the process. One young girl watches every movement. She imitates the twisting motion with a shorter piece of sinew beside her. Her first attempt unravels immediately. She smiles anyway. The older woman simply hands her another piece. Learning requires repetition. Nobody expects running. The smell of smoke drifts gently through camp as several hides are suspended above a slow-burning fire built specifically for curing leather. The smoke curls lazily around the skins, carrying compounds that help preserve them while discouraging insects and slowing decay. The hides gradually change color. Golden brown, deep amber, almost bronze. The scent settles into them permanently. Generations later, people may recognize that familiar smoky fragrance as the smell of winter itself. You step closer to the smoking rack. The warmth feels pleasant against your face. Not hot, just enough. Too much heat would damage the leather. Too little would prolong the process unnecessarily. Finding the balance comes only through experience, observation, and countless quiet corrections made over many seasons. Knowledge lives in small details, not dramatic discoveries. A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the valley. Snow lifts into graceful spirals before settling once again. You instinctively tighten your cloak. Everyone else does the same. Proper clothing allows movement without sacrificing warmth. Hunters must walk long distances. Gatherers bend repeatedly to collect wood or edible plants that still survive beneath snow. Children run, climb, and help carry supplies. Stiff garments become dangerous. Flexible ones preserve energy. Some scholars have proposed that prehistoric people may even have created layered footwear stuffed with dried grasses or moss for insulation. Direct archaeological evidence remains scarce because such materials decompose quickly, yet experiments with reconstructed clothing suggest surprisingly sophisticated solutions would have greatly improved comfort and survival. Researchers continue exploring the possibilities. Ice keeps many secrets. As afternoon approaches, the sky clears for the first time in days. Sunlight glitters across endless snowfields. The valley seems brighter, almost cheerful. You notice tiny ice crystals sparkling upon everyone's clothing, especially along the fur collars where warm breath has frozen during hours of work. Winter decorates everyone equally. One hunter returns carrying the skin of an Arctic fox. Its white fur nearly disappears against the snow. The pelt is small, still valuable. Nothing from the animal will be discarded. The fur may line gloves or children's clothing. Bones could become needles or decorative pieces. Sinew will strengthen future seams. Waste belongs to easier worlds, not this one. As evening draws closer, the entire band gathers inside the shelter. Freshly prepared clothing hangs nearby, gently warming beside the fire before tomorrow's journey. Someone tests a newly finished boot by pressing it firmly against the packed earth floor. It bends easily. A satisfied nod follows. No applause. Good craftsmanship speaks quietly. Dinner is simple, again roasted reindeer meat, warm marrow, and a handful of dried berries saved from late summer. The food disappears quickly after another long day of work. Outside, darkness settles over the frozen landscape. Inside, children curl beneath thick fur blankets sewn by hands that understand winter better than words ever could. The fire flickers softly across carefully stitched garments hanging from mammoth bone supports overhead. Every seam represents another lesson remembered. Every stitch reflects another season survived. And as you wrap your own fur cloak more tightly around your shoulders before sleep, you realize something remarkable. These garments are not merely clothing. They are thousands of hours of observation, thousands of careful decisions, thousands of winters teaching humanity how to transform the gifts of the natural world into warmth, comfort, and hope. Long before weaving mills, spinning wheels, or written patterns, skilled hands had already mastered one of civilization's oldest arts, the quiet craft of keeping another human being alive through winter. Section 5. The valley wakes before you, not with voices, not with birdsong, with movement. As the first pale ribbon of dawn spreads across the eastern horizon, distant shapes drift slowly through the snow. Hundreds of reindeer move together across the frozen plain, their breath rising like countless tiny clouds into the still morning air. Farther away, darker figures follow another path entirely. Wild horses. Beyond them, nearly hidden against the white hills, a few enormous silhouettes appear. Mammoths. You remain perfectly still. So does everyone else. No one rushes towards the animals, no one celebrates the sight. Experience has taught your people that seeing game and reaching it are entirely different things. Winter rewards patience far more often than excitement. Today is different. The hunting party has been preparing for this journey for several days. Autumn's stored food is shrinking. Dried meat still hangs inside the shelter, carefully protected from moisture. But every meal makes those bundles a little smaller. The valley offers one more opportunity before the deepest weeks of winter arrive. If this hunt succeeds, the entire band will eat well. If it fails, every decision afterward becomes more difficult. The air smells wonderfully clean. Almost too clean. Fresh snow has covered old scents, leaving only faint traces of pine resin, frozen earth, and distant smoke from your campfire. Hunters appreciate this, so do the animals. Everyone knows the wind matters. You kneel beside the fire while one of the elders quietly studies the smoke rising from the hearth. It climbs straight upward for several moments before drifting gently east. Good. The herd is west. Your scent will not betray you. Long before weather instruments existed, hunters became masters of invisible currents. A slight change in wind direction could undo hours of careful stalking. Entire generations learned to pause, observe, and wait for conditions that favored patience over haste. Nobody argues with the wind. Several hunters begin checking their equipment one final time. Each spear is examined carefully. Stone points are pressed gently with a thumb to confirm they remain firmly attached. Rawhide bindings receive another quick tightening. Wooden shafts are inspected for hidden cracks caused by freezing temperatures. One flaw could become fatal. Not dramatic. Simply true. You lift your own spear. Its polished wooden shaft feels smooth beneath your fingers despite the cold. The stone point catches the faint morning light, revealing countless tiny chips created by careful shaping weeks earlier. Beautiful. Dangerous. Necessary. Nearby, another hunter adjusts several slender throwing spears resting inside a leather-carrying frame. They are lighter than the main thrusting spears and designed for greater distance. Historians generally agree that prehistoric hunters developed remarkably effective stone-tipped weapons long before metal existed. By 50,000 years ago, many groups across Europe produced carefully crafted points using sophisticated flint-knapping techniques. Some scholars also believe spear-throwing technology may have been emerging in certain regions, although exactly when different innovations appeared remains an active area of research. The evidence is still growing. The questions remain fascinating. Children gather quietly near the edge of camp. They do not ask to come. They already know. Large hunts belong to experienced adults. Instead, they watch silently as each hunter disappears into the snowy landscape, storing every movement in memory for a future winter when they will make the same journey themselves. Learning often begins with watching someone walk away. The hunting party moves slowly, very slowly. The snow muffles footsteps remarkably well, but it also reveals every careless movement. A broken branch, an unnecessary conversation, or even breathing too heavily while climbing a ridge can disturb nearby animals long before they are visible. Silence becomes another tool, more valuable than many weapons. The valley unfolds before you in gentle waves of snow-covered grassland interrupted by scattered clusters of pine and birch. Ice glitters along the edges of a narrow stream that still flows beneath its frozen surface. You pause frequently, not because you are tired, because looking matters. Fresh tracks appear crossing the snow. Reindeer. Recent. The edges remain sharp. Another set overlaps them. Wolf. Older. You kneel beside the prints while the oldest hunter quietly studies them. He says nothing for nearly a minute. Then he points. The wolves followed. Not ahead. Behind. The herd is probably still nearby. No celebration follows this discovery. Only quiet nods. Every track tells part of a story. Experienced hunters learn to read them almost like sentences. The spacing between hoofprints suggests speed. Broken snow reveals direction changes. Tiny droplets of frozen urine indicate how recently animals passed. The snow remembers everything, at least for a while. Modern tracking experts often express admiration for indigenous and prehistoric hunting traditions because they demonstrate astonishing observational skills. Tiny details overlooked by most people can reveal age, health direction, and even emotional state of passing animals. You continue forward. The cold settles deeper into your boots. Despite thick layers of fur and dried grass packed around your feet, frozen ground slowly steals warmth from every step. Your breath becomes heavier as the land rises toward a broad ridge overlooking the valley below. Then everyone stops. The herd. Hundreds of reindeer spread across the open plain, digging through snow with their hooves to uncover frozen mosses and lichens. Steam rises gently from their bodies into the cold air. The sight is breathtaking and fragile. One careless movement could scatter them across miles of open country. The hunters spread apart naturally. No spoken instruction. Everyone already understands their role. Some circle wide to prevent escape toward nearby hills. Others remain hidden among scattered rocks, waiting patiently. Two experienced hunters slowly begin moving closer from downwind. Everything unfolds almost invisibly. The reindeer continue feeding. One raises its head, listens, then lowers it again. The wind remains faithful. You grip your spear more tightly. Your heartbeat becomes louder than the world around you. Time stretches strangely. Minutes feel like hours. Snowflakes drift gently through the air, landing silently upon fur clothing and wooden spear shafts. Then everything changes. One hunter rises, only slightly. Another follows. A reindeer suddenly notices movement and snorts sharply. Several nearby animals lift their heads together. The herd hesitates for one heartbeat, then explodes into motion. Snow erupts beneath hundreds of pounding hooves. The quiet valley transforms instantly into thunder. White clouds swirl around racing bodies as hunters spring forward with astonishing speed. Your spear leaves your hand. It flies cleanly, straight. One reindeer stumbles, another continues running. The herd sweeps past like a living river, disappearing across the frozen plain almost as quickly as it appeared. Silence returns. Gradually, you walk toward the fallen animal. Nobody shouts in triumph. Instead, the hunters gather quietly around the reindeer. One elder gently places his hand upon its thick winter coat for a brief moment before work begins. Respect comes first. Food follows. Many anthropologists believe prehistoric hunters often held deep respect for the animals sustaining their communities. While exact beliefs remain impossible to reconstruct fully, archaeological discoveries and comparisons with later traditional hunting cultures suggest gratitude and ritual may have accompanied successful hunts. Historians continue debating how widespread such practices were. The animals left no written records. Neither did the hunters. The reindeer is carefully prepared where it fell. Nothing will be wasted. Meat, hide, bones, antlers, sinew, even organs provide valuable nutrition during the harshest months. Every part carries purpose. The return journey is slower, much slower. Heavy loads rest upon wooden carrying frames strapped across broad shoulders. The smell of fresh meat fills the cold air, attracting curious ravens overhead. Faraway wolves watch. They keep their distance. For now, as the shelter finally appears beyond the trees, children run forward smiling. Adults waiting at camp immediately begin preparing smoking fires, sharpening, cutting tools, and clearing clean working spaces. Everyone has work. Everyone shares the reward. Tonight the fire will burn a little brighter. The smell of roasting meat will mingle with pine smoke beneath the mammoth bone roof. Stories will be told about the hunt not with boasting, but with careful attention to what was learned, what nearly went wrong, and what must be remembered before the next journey. Because winter is not finished, not even close. But for one precious evening, the people of this small Ice Age band have earned something almost as valuable as food itself. Confidence. The quiet certainty that preparation, patience, skilled hands, and trust in one another can still overcome the frozen world one successful hunt at a time. Section 6. The hunt is over. The real work has only begun. As dawn slowly brightens the snowy valley, the camp feels different from the morning before. The scent of fresh meat hangs in the crisp air, blending with pine smoke rising from the central fire. Ravens perch in nearby trees with unusual patience, occasionally calling to one another as though announcing yesterday's success to the rest of the forest. The entire band is already awake. Nobody wants to waste daylight. Winter allows very little room for delay. The reindeer brought back from the hunt now lies carefully divided upon clean hides spread across the frozen ground. Every portion has its place. Thick muscles are separated from smaller cuts. Fat is gathered into carved stone bowls. Bones are stacked neatly for later use. Tendons wait to become thread while the hide has already been carried to the smoking rack beside the shelter. Nothing is discarded, not even the smallest scraps. To modernize, this might seem extraordinary. To you it is ordinary. In Ice Age Europe, every successful hunt carries a responsibility as important as the hunt itself. Capturing an animal is only the beginning. Preserving its value through the long winter determines whether that success lasts a week or several months. Food disappears quickly. Preparation makes it endure. You kneel beside several long strips of fresh meat, hanging from a wooden frame. The pieces have been cut thinner than your hand, allowing cold air to reach every surface. Tiny crystals of frost already sparkle along the edges. Nature offers help, if you understand it. The freezing temperatures surrounding your camp act as an enormous natural storehouse instead of fighting the cold your people work with it. Meat left exposed in carefully chosen conditions freezes solid within hours, remaining edible far longer than it would during warmer seasons. Winter becomes an ally, at least sometimes. Historians generally agree that Ice Age communities relied heavily upon natural freezing, drying, and smoking to preserve food, although the exact combinations varied across regions and climates. Archaeological evidence reveals extensive butchering practices, specialized cutting marks on bones, and repeated use of hearths that suggest sophisticated food processing far beyond simple roasting. Exactly how long preserved meat remained usable is still debated. Climate, moisture, animal species, and storage methods likely produce different results from one valley to another. You lift another strip of meat. Its surface feels firm already. Cold air bites your fingers immediately after removing your gloves. The sensation reminds you why work must continue without unnecessary pauses. Nearby, an older man builds a second smoking fire. Unlike the main hearth, this one burns slowly beneath a carefully arranged rack of green branches. Damp wood produces more smoke than flame surrounding hanging meat, with a fragrant grey cloud carrying the rich scent of pine resin and hardwood. The smoke curls upward lazily. It never rushes. Hours pass. Then more hours. Smoking demands patience rather than effort. The fire must remain gentle. Too much heat cooks the meat instead of preserving it. Too little smoke allows moisture to linger, inviting spoilage once temperatures eventually begin to rise. Watching becomes work. Good preservation rewards attention. The smell gradually changes. Fresh blood gives way to warm wood smoke. The meat darkens slowly. Its surface becomes firmer beneath your fingertips. The transformation feels almost magical, though. Every step follows careful observation accumulated over countless generations. A young boy approaches carrying several handfuls of juniper branches. He places them beside the smoking fire without speaking. An older woman nods approvingly. The aromatic branches produce thicker smoke while releasing a sharp, clean fragrance that drifts across the camp. Some researchers believe prehistoric communities intentionally selected different woods and plants for smoking food, although exactly which species were preferred remains uncertain because ancient smoke rarely leaves obvious traces. The evidence whispers. Experiment fills the silence. Not everything becomes dried meat. Some marrow-rich bones are placed beside the central fire instead. Slow roasting allows precious fat hidden deep inside to soften gradually before being carefully removed using slender wooden sticks. The smell is irresistible. Rich, nutty, deeply satisfying. Children gather instinctively. Their eyes remain fixed upon the roasting bones. Nobody shoos them away. Animal fat holds extraordinary importance in this frozen world. Modern nutritional science confirms what prehistoric families understood through experience alone. Fat provides enormous amounts of energy, helping bodies generate warmth while supporting long days of physical labor in freezing conditions. Lean meat fills the stomach. Fat keeps you alive. You watch as warm marrow slides gently into a carved stone bowl. Nothing spills. Even tiny droplets are scraped carefully from the bone using polished antler tools. Waste belongs to warmer places. The camp settles into a quiet rhythm. Some people continue slicing meat. Others repair storage frames. A few gather additional snow, melting it slowly over the fire to replenish water supplies. Although snow surrounds you everywhere, eating it directly would steal precious body heat. Melting it first costs firewood but protects the body's warmth far more effectively. Even drinking requires planning. By midday, the winter sun rises no higher than the tops of distant trees before beginning its slow descent once again. Its pale light reflects brilliantly across the frozen landscape, making untouched snow almost painfully bright. You squint. Even winter sunlight demands respect. Far beyond the camp, several wolves appear upon a distant ridge. They stop. Watch. Wait. The smell of fresh meat has carried farther than anyone hoped. No one seems surprised. Predators understand opportunity just as humans do. Several hunters quietly move additional supplies inside the shelter, while another strengthens the wooden drying racks. Nobody panics. The wolves remain hundreds of yards away. Still, preparation never hurts. Some anthropologists have suggested that the presence of large predators may actually have influenced how prehistoric camps organized food storage and daily routines. While definitive proof remains elusive, it seems entirely reasonable that preserving valuable meat required not only protection from weather but also vigilance against scavengers, both large and small. Historians continued discussing how frequently wolves competed directly with human groups. The answer probably changed with every season. As afternoon slowly fades, something unexpected happens. One elderly woman uncovers a small leather pouch hidden beneath stacked hides. Inside rests a handful of dried berries gathered many months earlier. Tiny, wrinkled, almost forgotten. She smiles. The berries are carefully mixed into warm rendered fat, creating a surprisingly rich paste shared among everyone. It tastes slightly sweet, slightly tart, mostly comforting. The children grin. Even the adults seem quietly delighted. Little luxuries matter more during winter than abundance ever could. A single preserved berry carries memories of summer, sunlight, buzzing insects, green valleys, and long evenings that now feel impossibly distant. Food feeds more than hunger, it nourishes memory. As darkness gradually returns, the preserved meat now hangs safely above slow fires or rests frozen beneath carefully arranged coverings of hide and snow. Tomorrow more work will continue. There is always more work, yet tonight brings quiet satisfaction. The hunting success no longer belongs only to yesterday. It has been carried forward into the future through skill, patience, and shared effort. The fire crackles softly. Smoke drifts upward. Outside snow begins falling once again. Inside your people gather around warm bowls of roasted marrow, preserved meat, and stories carried from older winters. One child asks whether the meat will last until spring. An elder smiles before answering. If we remember everything we learned today. The words linger gently in your thoughts as you settle beneath your fur blanket. Because that is the true secret of surviving an Ice Age winter. Not strength, not luck, memory. Remembering how to preserve food when abundance briefly appears. Remembering which wood burns slowly. Remembering where cold protects rather than destroys, and remembering that every meal enjoyed during the deepest winter began with careful hands months before anyone felt truly hungry. The fire burns lower. The valley grows silent once more. Beyond the shelter walls, winter still rules the land. Inside, careful preparation has quietly stolen another victory from the cold. Section 7. Morning begins with laughter. It is not loud, not the kind that echoes across the frozen valley. It is a quick burst from two children chasing each other around a pile of stacked firewood before an older woman gently reminds them not to knock it over. They stop immediately, exchange mischievous smiles, and begin helping carry smaller branches toward the shelter instead. The game simply changes. That is how childhood works here. You watch them for a moment while fastening your fur cloak against another day of biting wind. Frost sparkles across the camp, turning every blade of dried grass into delicate crystal. Smoke rises steadily from the fire, carrying the familiar scent of pine-roasted marrow and cured leather into the still morning air. Winter feels endless. Children make it lighter. Modern people sometimes imagine prehistoric childhood as nothing but hardship and constant danger. Certainly life in Ice Age Europe demanded resilience from an early age. Yet archaeological discoveries suggest something far more recognizable. Children were cherished, protected, taught patiently. Their survival represented the future of the entire community. You kneel beside the fire while several youngsters gather around an elderly man sharpening a flint blade. None of them interrupt him. They simply watch. His hands move slowly, deliberately. Every strike removes a tiny flake from the stone. Click. Pause. Click. The rhythm itself becomes a lesson. Without realizing it, the children are learning that rushing often breaks both tools and opportunities. Learning begins with quiet observation. Long before schools existed, knowledge traveled through watching, listening, copying, and gentle correction. Every adult became a teacher in some way. Every ordinary task held another lesson hidden inside it. One little boy picks up a rounded pebble and pretends to shape it like flint. The adults smile. Nobody tells him to stop. Imagination grows into skill. Nearby two girls carefully separate dried grasses into neat bundles. Their fingers move surprisingly confidently despite their age. The bundles will later become insulation inside boots or a bedding beneath sleeping hides. One bundle slips apart. The younger girl sighs. Her older sister calmly shows her how to twist the stems together more tightly. No lecture follows, only demonstration. Patience teaches better than scolding. Historians generally agree that prehistoric children likely became involved in practical work gradually rather than suddenly. Evidence from wear patterns on small tools, footprints preserved in ancient cave floors, and comparisons with traditional hunter-gatherer societies suggests young people learned by participating alongside experienced adults from remarkably early ages. Exactly when children mastered particular skills remains uncertain. Different communities probably followed different traditions. Some scholars even suggest that prehistoric learning resembled an apprenticeship spread across an entire childhood rather than formal instruction divided into separate stages. Knowledge grew mentorally. Like trees, you step beyond the shelter and notice several children kneeling beside yesterday's snowfall. Their attention is fixed upon the ground, not because they are playing, because someone has drawn animal tracks in the snow using a stick. Large rounded prints, sharp hoof marks, tiny paw impression. An elderly hunter points to each one in turn. No words at first. Then one child answers. Reindeer, a nod, another track. Wolf, another nod. Finally, a much larger footprint. Silence. The children study it carefully. One whispers, mammoth. The hunter smiles. Correct. The lesson continues. Winter provides the perfect classroom. Fresh snow records every traveller passing through the valley, transforming the landscape into an enormous book waiting to be read. Children learn quickly because the evidence lies directly beneath their feet. The snow remembers. Teachers merely translate. You cannot help smiling as one curious little girl accidentally identifies her own footprints as those of a giant bear. Everyone laughs. Even she does. Moments later, she tries again. This time she notices the difference. Mistakes become memories. Good teachers understand that. As the morning grows brighter, several adults prepare to repair a damaged carrying frame used for transporting firewood. Two children immediately volunteer to collect straight willow branches from a nearby stream. They receive permission, with conditions. Stay together. Return before midday. Do not cross the frozen river. Simple rules, important rules. Responsibility arrives in small pieces, not all at once. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have often observed children enjoying surprising freedom compared with many agricultural civilizations that followed. Within sensible boundaries, youngsters explored, experimented, and solved problems independently while remaining surrounded by attentive adults. Some researchers believe Ice Age communities may have followed similar patterns. Historians continue debating exactly how much independence prehistoric children enjoyed because direct evidence remains frustratingly limited. Children rarely leave behind archaeology. Their laughter disappears first. Near the shelter entrance, another lesson unfolds. A young teenager carefully threads prepared sinew through a polished bone needle. His brow furrows with concentration. The opening is tiny. The sinew stubbornly separates into loose fibers each that he tries. He exhales slowly. Attempts again. Success! The older woman beside him offers no applause. Only another piece of leather. Practice continues. Bone needles discovered at several upper Paleolithic sites reveal astonishing craftsmanship. Their carefully drilled eyes resemble modern sewing needles closely enough to surprise many visitors seeing them in museums today. Exactly when eyed needles first became widespread remains a subject of ongoing research. Some of the earliest securely dated examples appear slightly later than 50,000 years ago, though. Simpler awls and piercing tools certainly existed much earlier. Innovation seldom arrives overnight. It accumulates quietly. The afternoon brings an unexpected challenge. A flock of ravens descends upon scraps left near the butchering area. Children notice first. Without shouting, they wave their arms gently while laughing as the clever birds hop backward just beyond reach. One raven steals a tiny piece anyway. The children applaud, not because they lost, because the bird earned it. Respect extends beyond humans. The old stories often describe ravens as watchful companions, clever tricksters or messengers carrying secrets across the frozen world. Whether such beliefs already existed 50,000 years ago remains impossible to know. Historians still debate how symbolic prehistoric relationships with animals truly became. Cave art, carved ornaments, and carefully arranged animal remains hint at meanings beyond survival. The complete picture remains hidden, perhaps forever. As afternoon light begins fading, the children gather inside the shelter. Outside grows colder by the hour. Inside, warmth wraps around everyone like another fur blanket. Oh, yeah, wonder fur blanket. Someone begins telling a familiar story, not merely for entertainment, for memory. The tale follows a clever fox escaping wolves by crossing thin ice only it understood. Children listen closely. Adults do too. The story may sound simple. Hidden inside are practical lessons about reveres, seasons, predator behavior, and caution. Stories carry maps. Invisible ones. You realize something remarkable. Almost everything these children need to survive adulthood is already being placed gently into their minds, not through commands, but through example repetition, observation, laughter, and quiet evenings around the fire. Education has no classroom, only community. The fire crackles softly as another child proudly presents a small carved piece of antler shaped into the rough outline of a reindeer. It is imperfect, crooked, beautiful. The elder who receives it turns it over carefully in his weathered hands. He smiles, then hangs it beside the sleeping area, not because it is flawless, because someone learned while making it. Outside snow begins falling once more. Large flakes drift silently through the darkening sky. Inside, children gradually curl beneath warm fur blankets after another day filled with lessons they may not even recognize yet. Tomorrow they will identify more tracks, carry more wood, watch more skilled hands, ask more questions. One day, without noticing exactly when it happened, they will become the adults patiently guiding another generation through the same frozen landscape. Winter teaches everyone. The youngest simply begin listening first, and as you settle beside the glowing fire, listening to the gentle breathing of children already asleep, you understand that humanity's greatest inheritance has never been stone tools or mammoth bones. It has always been the quiet passing of knowledge from one caring hand to another, ensuring that every hard-earned lesson survives long after the winter that created it has melted away. Section 8. The night belongs to more than humans. You realize this long before the first howl reaches your ears. Darkness settles early across the valley, covering the snow with soft blue shadows that gradually deepen into black. The last glow of sunset disappears behind distant hills, and the frozen world becomes a place where hearing matters more than seeing. The fire burns steadily. Outside something is moving. Not close. Not yet. The sound is almost too gentle to notice at first. Snow compresses beneath careful paws somewhere beyond the ring of pale light surrounding your shelter. Then silence returns, leaving only the steady whisper of wind weaving through pine branches. Everyone hears it. No one panics. Living in Ice Age Europe means accepting that humans are only one species among many trying to survive another winter. The same valleys that feed your people also support wolves, cave hyenas, cave lions, foxes, lynxes, wolverines, and enormous brown bears sleeping through the coldest months. You share the land, whether you wish to or not. An older hunter quietly rises from beside the fire. He walks toward the shelter entrance without haste, lifting the heavy hide just enough to peer into the darkness. His eyes search patiently, allowing them to adjust before he studies the snowy landscape beyond. Nothing obvious appears. Still he waits. Patience often reveals what haste cannot. You join him at the entrance. Cold air immediately slips inside, carrying the clean scent of snow mixed with distant pine resin. Somewhere far away, a raven gives a single harsh call before settling into silence again. Then it comes. A wolf's howl. Low, beautiful. The sound rolls across the valley, bouncing gently from frozen hillsides before fading into the endless winter night. Another answers. Then another. Soon an entire chorus drifts through the darkness. The children stop talking. Even the fire seems quieter. Wolves inspire respect more than fear. Healthy wolf packs generally avoid unnecessary confrontations with humans, particularly organized groups gathered around bright fires. Yet everyone understands that hunger changes behavior. A harsh winter can push predators toward opportunities they might otherwise ignore. The distance matters. Tonight they remain comfortably far away. Archaeological evidence suggests wolves occupied much of Ice Age Europe alongside human communities for thousands of years. Historians generally agree that both species often hunted similar prey, creating occasional competition, but also long periods of cautious coexistence. Exactly how frequently dangerous encounters occurred remains uncertain. Bones tell only part of the story. Many peaceful nights leave no trace at all. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The wind has strengthened. Tiny snow crystals drift through the air, sparkling briefly whenever they pass the firelight before vanishing again into darkness. The world beyond the flames feels impossibly large. The world inside feels wonderfully small. Several hunters quietly inspect the camp perimeter before everyone settles for the night. No walls surround your shelter. No fences separate people from the wilderness. Instead, awareness serves as protection. Fresh firewood is stacked within easy reach. Stone-tipped spears rest beside the entrance. Additional branches are placed upon the fire. Simple precaution, repeated every evening. One child notices something in the snow just beyond the shelter. Tracks. Fresh ones. You step closer with one of the elders carrying a burning branch. The orange light flickers across the frozen ground. Fox. The prints are small, delicate, almost graceful. They circle the edge of camp before disappearing toward the stream. The animal likely smelled scraps from yesterday's butchering. Nothing more. Foxes often live close to larger predators without drawing attention, surviving through intelligence rather than strength. They remind your people that survival comes in many forms. Not every victory requires size. Nearby, another set of tracks appears beneath drifting snow. Larger. Rounder. The elder kneels carefully. Her brushes loose powder aside with a gloved hand. Lynx. Its broad paws spread naturally across the snow, allowing it to walk almost silently over surfaces that trouble heavier animals. Somewhere out there, hidden among scattered pines, the great cat continues its patient hunt. You never see it. The forest does. Modern researchers know Eurasian lynxes inhabited Ice Age Europe alongside early modern humans. Their elusive nature probably made actual encounters uncommon despite sharing the same landscapes. Some animals become legends simply because they remain unseen. Far beyond the camp, another sound rises unexpectedly. A deep, rough laugh. Not human. Not friendly. Cave hyenas. Their calls echo strangely through the frozen air, sending small shivers along your spine despite the warmth of the fire. These powerful scavengers and hunters once ranged widely across Ice Age Europe, often competing with wolves, lions, and humans for access to carcasses. Fossil evidence found in caves shows they possessed exceptionally strong jaws capable of crushing even massive bones to reach nutritious marrow. Nothing edible escaped them. Historians continue debating how intense competition between humans and cave hyenas became. Some archaeological sites suggest repeated occupation of the same caves by both species at different times, hinting at an ancient struggle over valuable shelter. The caves changed owners. Again and again, you quietly add another log to the fire. The flames leap higher. Light pushes farther into the darkness. For a few moments, then the night gently closes around it once more. Fire cannot conquer the wilderness. It merely creates a temporary island within it. The children have grown sleepy. One little girl curls beneath a thick reindeer hide while listening to distant howls. She asks whether wolves ever become lonely. The question surprises everyone. An older woman smiles softly before answering. Not while they have their family. The child nods thoughtfully, then closes her eyes. The answer seems enough. Outside, the snowfall stops. Clouds slowly drift apart, revealing a sky crowded with brilliant stars. Without cities or artificial lights, the heavens appear astonishingly bright. A pale ribbon of the Milky Way stretches across the darkness like frozen smoke. You step outside once more, only briefly. Cold immediately surrounds you from every direction. The snow reflects enough starlight that the valley glows faintly silver. Your breath rises in slow clouds while every sound seems sharper beneath the open sky. Then you notice something enormous, far across the plain. A moving shadow, too large for reindeer, too deliberate for drifting snow. A mammoth! Its massive shape crosses the moonlit landscape with calm confidence, followed by two smaller companions. Their shaggy coats shimmer softly beneath the stars before they disappear beyond a low ridge. You simply watch. Some moments ask for silence. Not every giant needs to be hunted. Not every encounter changes history. Sometimes witnessing another creature sharing the same frozen world feels meaningful enough. Researchers have long debated how closely prehistoric humans observed the seasonal movements of mammoths and other great Ice Age animals. Many scholars believe intimate familiarity with migration routes formed an essential part of survival, while others suggest changing climates frequently altered these ancient patterns. Nature rarely followed fixed schedules. Neither did life. Back inside the shelter, someone quietly stirs the glowing embers before covering portions with ash to preserve heat until morning. The fire settles into a slow, steady pulse, almost breathing. Outside, wolves continue their distant conversations across the valley. The hyenas fall silent. A fox slips unnoticed between snow-covered shrubs. Somewhere beneath a fallen tree, a hare waits motionless until danger passes. The wilderness never truly sleeps. It simply changes, shifts. You close your eyes. The sounds no longer feel threatening. They feel familiar. Every howl, every rustle, every faint crack of freezing wood. They remind you that survival is not achieved by defeating the natural world. It comes from understanding your place within it. Here beneath the endless winter sky of Ice Age Europe, humans are neither rulers nor helpless victims. You are simply another living creature sharing the darkness with countless others, each carrying its own quiet hope of greeting another sunrise. Section 9. The storm leaves no map behind. It erases the old one instead. When morning finally arrives, yesterday's footprints have vanished beneath a smooth blanket of fresh snow. The valley looks untouched, as though no human animal or bird has crossed it for centuries. Even familiar landmarks appear different beneath thick white drifts. The world has been rewritten. You must learn to read it again. Cold air fills your lungs as you step outside the shelter. The sky is perfectly clear after the night snowfall, glowing with a pale blue that seems almost fragile. Tiny crystals sparkle across the open plain, reflecting sunlight so brightly that you instinctively narrow your eyes. The silence feels enormous. Then you hear it. A soft whisper. Wind, not strong enough to shake the trees, just enough to carry loose snow dancing across the frozen ground in delicate ribbons. An older woman notices it immediately. She pauses beside the firewood stack and lifts a few strands of loose hair from beneath her fur hood. The breeze moves them gently. She smiles. The weather is changing. No one questions her. You cannot see the future, but you can often see its arrival. long before written calendars or scientific instruments. Ice Age people depended upon careful observation of the natural world. Tiny shifts in wind cloud formations, animal behavior, and snow texture often revealed approaching storms hours, sometimes even days before the first flakes began to fall. Nature always speaks. Quietly. You simply have to listen. The hunting party has no plans to chase game today. Instead, everyone walks toward a broad hillside overlooking the valley. Not for exercise, for information. From the ridge, the land stretches in every direction like an enormous white sea. Every moving creature leaves visible signs against the untouched snow. The valley becomes a book. Every track becomes a sentence. You kneel beside the oldest hunter as he studies the ground below. At first you notice only scattered lines crossing the snow. He notices much more. There. He points toward a narrow trail weaving between two clusters of pine trees. Reindeer. Perhaps 20 animals traveling northeast. Several hours old. You blink. How could he know all that? He walks closer to the edge of the ridge. Without speaking, he traces invisible patterns in the air. The snow pressed deeper on one side of each hoofprint reveals direction. Tiny crystals blown gently into the edges suggest how much time has passed. Broken twigs nearby indicate the animal slowed to feed before continuing onward. Nothing is random. Everything leaves evidence. Modern trackers often describe reading footprints as similar to reading handwriting. Every animal carries its own rhythm. Healthy individuals move differently from injured ones. Calm herds leave different patterns than frightened ones. The ground remembers, at least until the next storm. Nearby, another set of prints crosses the reindeer trail. Smaller. Round. The hunter kneels. Fox. The tracks wander back and forth unpredictably before disappearing beneath a fallen tree. Looking for mice. He barely whispers the explanation. You imagine the little predator listening carefully beneath the snow before diving headfirst through the icy surface to catch prey hidden below. Winter demands creativity. From every species. Farther along the ridge, another discovery draws everyone's attention. Huge footprints, deep enough to hold your entire hand. Mammoth. The tracks march steadily across the valley toward distant birch woodland, each step nearly the same distance apart. No panic, no hurry, only confidence. The enormous animals wasted very little energy during winter travel. Every movement consumed valuable calories, so efficiency mattered just as much to them as it did to your people. Some researchers believe mammoths followed remarkably consistent seasonal routes across Ice Age landscapes, returning to favorable feeding grounds year after year. Others argue that changing climates, shifting vegetation, and unpredictable snowfall forced constant adjustments. Historians continue debating exactly how predictable these migrations truly became. The mammoths never left maps. Only footprints. Clouds begin forming low along the western horizon. Thin at first. Almost invisible. An elderly woman studies them quietly. They're climbing. Nobody asks what she means. Everyone understands. High, slowly rising clouds often signal changing weather long before snowfall begins. Combined with the gentle western breeze and increasing moisture carried through the air, they suggest another storm may arrive within a day or two. Preparation starts immediately. No announcement is needed. Two people head toward hidden firewood stores. Others inspect shelter bindings. Several children begin gathering scattered branches exposed by yesterday's wind. Reading weather changes nothing. Responding changes everything. As midday approaches, sunlight warms the upper layer of snow just enough to create a thin crust across open ground. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Every step sounds different now. The hunters notice. Hard snow carries sound farther. Today's conditions favor staying close to camp rather than stalking nervous animals capable of hearing footsteps from surprising distances. Snow has many voices. Each one tells a story. Near the frozen stream, you discover delicate feathers scattered across the surface. Tiny, grey, still fresh. No bird remains, only feathers. A hawk probably caught its breakfast shortly after sunrise. Predators leave clues too. Above your head, ravens circle lazily in wide spirals. Their behavior changes throughout the day. Sometimes they fly directly toward distant carcasses. Sometimes they gather above hunting wolves. Sometimes they simply ride warm air rising from sunlit slopes. Many traditional hunting cultures learned to observe ravens carefully because the birds occasionally revealed opportunities hidden beyond the next ridge. Whether Ice Age Europeans intentionally interpreted raven behavior this way remains uncertain. The possibility fascinates archaeologists. Intelligent birds often attract intelligent observers. The afternoon grows strangely still. The wind disappears. Not gradually, almost completely. Pine branches stop moving. Smoke rises straight upward from the shelter. Even the ravens settle quietly into nearby trees. The valley seems to be holding its breath. The oldest members of the band exchange brief glances. Too quiet. Very often periods of unusual calm precede changing weather systems. Modern meteorology explains many of these shifts through atmospheric pressure, yet long before scientific vocabulary existed, generations of careful observers recognized familiar patterns simply because their survival depended upon them. You feel it too. Not fear. Expectation. The air itself seems heavier. The smell changes slightly. Fresh snow carries almost no scent, but approaching moisture often softens the crisp edge of winter air, bringing faint hints of distant forests, frozen rivers, and damp earth buried beneath layers of ice. The difference is subtle, once noticed impossible to ignore. A child asks why everyone suddenly works faster. An elder smiles gently. The sky already answered. The child looks upward, sees nothing unusual. Not yet. One day, those same clouds will speak clearly to younger eyes. Knowledge goes slowly. Like snowfall, by late afternoon preparations are complete. Extra firewood rests beneath protective hides. Fresh water has been melted and stored inside carefully carved containers. The shelter walls receive another inspection. Small gaps are sealed with moss and packed snow. Simple work, potentially life-saving. As evening approaches, the first faint halo appears around the setting sun. A pale ring, almost invisible. Several adults notice immediately. Ice crystals high in the atmosphere. Another quiet warning. Historians generally agree that prehistoric people possessed extraordinary environmental awareness, although measuring such knowledge archaeologically remains difficult. Much of it existed only in memory experience and shared observation passed from one generation to the next. No written manual survived. The landscape itself became the teacher. Darkness settles gently across the valley. The fire crackles inside the shelter, while everyone enjoys another modest meal of preserved meat and warm marrow broth. Outside, the stars begin appearing one by one. Far to the west, clouds continue gathering. Tomorrow may bring another storm, or perhaps only stronger winds. No one claims certainty. Nature seldom offers guarantees. Instead, she offers hints, a whisper in the wind, a raven changing direction, clouds climbing the horizon, snow speaking beneath your feet. You wrap your fur blanket around your shoulders and glance once more toward the dark valley beyond the firelight. The wilderness has been teaching all day, and for another successful winter evening, your people have remembered how to listen. Section 10. The valley is quiet when you first notice them. Not animals. People. Tiny figures move slowly along a distant ridge, their dark silhouettes standing out against the endless snow. They pause often, just as your own hunters would. They study the land before taking another careful step. No one reaches for a spear. Not yet. Everyone watches. In Ice Age Europe, seeing another group of humans is an uncommon event. The land is vast, winter is unforgiving, and small communities may spend months without meeting anyone beyond their own families. Yet people do exist beyond the next valley, beyond the frozen river, and beyond the distant hills. The world is lonely, but never empty. The older hunters gather near the edge of camp. No hurried conversation follows, only quiet observation. How many? Perhaps 8, maybe 10. Hard to tell from this distance. The figures disappear briefly behind a rise before emerging once more. One carries a long spear over a shoulder. Another appears to be pulling a simple sled made from poles lashed together with leather. They are traveling, not hunting. That matters. Travelers often carry families. Hunters usually move differently. You notice one smaller figure walking beside an adult, a child. The tension around your camp eases just a little. People bringing children rarely seek unnecessary conflict during the hardest part of winter. Still, caution remains wise. The fire continues burning. Nobody hides it. A visible fire announces something important. We are here. It also says something else. We are not afraid. For countless generations, small human bands crossed enormous territories, following migrating animals, seasonal plants, and familiar routes remembered through stories rather than maps. Their encounters with neighboring groups were probably rare enough to remain memorable, yet common enough to shape the flow of ideas across entire regions. Historians generally agree that Ice Age communities maintained social connections extending far beyond individual camps. Archaeological discoveries reveal stone materials transported hundreds of miles from their original sources, shells carried inland from distant coastlines, and ornaments fashioned from materials unavailable in local landscapes. Objects traveled, people carried them. Exactly how frequently these meetings occurred remains uncertain. Some scholars imagine regular seasonal gatherings. Others suggest far less predictable encounters shaped by climate migration and opportunity. The snow keeps many conversations hidden. Your own group begins preparing quietly, not for battle. For visitors, fresh meat is placed near the fire. Additional logs are added to brighten the flames. The shelter entrance is cleared of drifting snow. Simple gestures, important ones, hospitality and caution walk side by side. Hours pass before the strangers finally approach close enough for faces to become visible. Their clothing resembles yours in purpose rather than appearance. Layers of reindeer fur, wolf pelts, leather bindings. One older man wears an impressive necklace carved from animal teeth polished smooth through years of use. Another traveller carries a bundle wrapped carefully inside treated hide. Everyone stops several spear lengths apart. Silence settles. Wind whispers through nearby pines. No one moves. Then the oldest woman from your band steps forward. She raises one empty hand, palm open. The visitors respond in kind. Slowly, deliberately. No one smiles yet. Trust arrives carefully during winter. A middle-aged hunter from the visiting group reaches into a leather pouch hanging from his belt. Not quickly. Never quickly. He removes something small and places it gently upon the snow before stepping back. A piece of amber. Golden. Translucent. Sunlight catches it beautifully despite the pale winter ski. Your own elder studies the object before placing several beautifully worked flint blades beside it. No words. Not immediately. Trade begins through patience. Archaeologists have uncovered remarkable evidence showing that prehistoric people exchanged valuable materials across astonishing distances. Baltic amber Mediterranean shells, carefully crafted stone tools, pigments and decorative objects appear far from their natural origins, suggesting networks of contact spanning hundreds of miles. The exact nature of these exchanges remains debated. Were they direct trades? Gifts? Marriage exchanges? Seasonal gatherings? Perhaps all of them. History leaves possibilities, not complete explanations. The mood gradually softens. Children peek curiously from behind adults. One little boy from the visiting group notices a carved antler figurine hanging near your shelter entrance. His eyes widen. He points excitedly. Your youngest carver carefully removes it from the wall and offers it for inspection. The visitor turns it over gently in tiny hands. He smiles, then reluctantly returns it. Some things become understood without sharing a common language. Curiosity needs very few words. As afternoon light spreads across the valley, both groups gather around the central fire. The smoke rises peacefully into the cold sky. Someone begins slicing smoked reindeer meat. Another offers warm marrow broth inside a carved stone bowl. Food crosses invisible boundaries long before conversation does. Researchers believe a language among early modern humans had likely become highly sophisticated by 50,000 years ago, though exactly how different neighboring groups communicated remains impossible to reconstruct. Perhaps their languages were closely related. Perhaps gestures filled important gaps. Perhaps laughter accomplished what vocabulary could not. No recording survived. Only imagination guided by evidence. One visiting hunter carries an unusually long spear tipped with finely shaped flint unlike any stone found near your valley. You examine it carefully. The workmanship is extraordinary. Thin, balanced, sharp enough to reflect sunlight. Its maker understood stone almost as if speaking directly with it. Your own hunters respond by displaying a newly crafted hide scraper polished from years of careful use. Both groups admire each other's skills. Knowledge itself becomes part of the exchange. A young woman from the visitors demonstrates an unfamiliar method of wrapping leather around boot tops using narrow strips of braided sinew. Several people from your camp watch closely. One quietly copies the technique. Innovation spreads gently, without announcements, without inventions being introduced, simply by being seen. Historians often describe this gradual sharing of ideas as one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. Small improvements in clothing, shelter, construction, hunting methods, or toolmaking could spread from one community to another over generations, eventually reaching people who never met the original innovator. Ideas travel farther than footsteps. As evening approaches, stories replace trade. No one fully understands every spoken word. They do not need to. One elder imitates the enormous stride of a mammoth crossing deep snow. Children from both camps burst into laughter. Another traveller describes a river freezing so completely that wolves crossed where fish once swam. Gestures complete the tale. Faces provide emotion. Shared experience fills the rest. Around the fire, everyone looks remarkably similar. Smoke-darkened clothing, weathered hands, bright observant eyes reflecting orange flames. Winter has shaped every face. One elderly visitor carries something wrapped carefully inside soft leather. He unfolds it slowly. Red ochre, brilliant even in fading light. The rich pigment glows like captured sunset against the snow. Several members of your group nod respectfully. Ochre serves many purposes. Body decoration, symbolic rituals, perhaps even practical uses in hide preparation and preservation. Exactly why prehistoric communities valued red ochre so deeply continues to intrigue historians. Archaeological sites throughout Ice Age Europe contain remarkable quantities of this vivid mineral, yet its full significance remains one of prehistory's enduring mysteries. Some secrets survive because they were never written down. Darkness begins settling over the valley. The visiting group cannot remain. Their own shelter lies many miles away. Winter nights arrive too quickly to waste precious daylight. Farewells happen quietly. No grand ceremony. Hands touch shoulders. Small gifts exchange owners. A polished flint blade. A pouch of dried berries. Several carefully prepared sinew cords. One child waves. Another waves back. Then the travelers begin disappearing into the snowy landscape, their figures growing smaller with every step until the valley quietly swallows them once more. The fire burns steadily behind you. The camp feels unchanged, yet something important has happened. Your people possess new ideas, new stories, new friendships stretching across the frozen wilderness. The world suddenly feels larger, and somehow less lonely. As the stars emerge overhead, you realize that surviving an Ice Age winter depends upon more than strong shelters or successful hunts. Sometimes survival arrives walking across the snow carrying unfamiliar tools, distant memories, and quiet reminders that somewhere beyond every frozen horizon other people are keeping another fire alive. Section 11. The cave waits quietly. It has waited through countless winters before yours. It will wait through countless more. You leave the shelter just after sunrise, following a narrow trail, climbing steadily toward a line of limestone cliffs overlooking the frozen valley. Snow crunches softly beneath your boots while your breath rises in slow white clouds that vanish into the crisp morning air. The cave entrance appears gradually. Dark, still, almost hidden behind wind-shaped drifts of snow. You stop several steps away, not from fear, from respect. Caves are different from ordinary shelters. They hold memories, some practical, some mysterious. The air changes as you approach the entrance. The familiar smell of pine and smoke gives way to damp stone, cold earth, and the faint mineral scent carried by water that has seeped through the rock for thousands of years. It smells ancient, because it is. The older members of your band enter first, not because they move fastest, because they know the cave. Their feet avoid loose stones almost without looking. They remember where the floor rises gently, where the ceiling lowers unexpectedly, and where hidden pools collect icy water throughout the winter. Knowledge lights the way, even before the fire does. One hunter kneels near the entrance and strikes carefully prepared flint against a piece of iron-rich stone. Tiny sparks leap into a nest of dried fungus. Gentle smoke curls upward. Then a small flame appears. Another torch joins it. Soon several warm points of orange light begin pushing softly against the darkness. The cave awakens. Its walls flicker with dancing shadows that stretch, shrink, and sway as everyone walks deeper inside. Outside winter rules the valley. Inside time feels different. The cave muffles the wind completely. Every footstep echoes gently through the stone passages before fading into silence. Water drips somewhere far beyond the reach of the torchlight. Drip. Pause. Drip. The rhythm feels older than memory itself. Many Ice Age caves across Europe served practical purposes at different times. Some provided shelter during severe weather. Others became temporary hunting camps or places where valuable resources could be stored safely away from scavengers. Yet not every cave tells the same story. Some reveal something más or intriguing. You pass through a narrow opening into a larger chamber. The ceiling rises unexpectedly high overhead. Torchlight reaches only partway before darkness swallows the rest. Along one wall, faint reddish markings catch your attention. At first they seem random. Then your eyes adjust. Lines, curves, shapes. An animal. Another. Perhaps several. The images are simple, yet unmistakable. A bison with lowered head. A horse in motion. The broad outline of what might be a mammoth. The paintings seem alive beneath the flickering flames, almost moving as the light dances across uneven stone. You stand completely still. So does everyone else. Modern archaeologists have discovered breathtaking cave paintings throughout Europe, including famous sites such as Lascaux Chauvet and Altamira. Some date tens of thousands of years into the past, preserving astonishing artistic skill despite the immense passage of time. The cave surrounding you belongs to that same tradition of possibility. Historians generally agree that Ice Age people possessed remarkable artistic abilities, yet the purpose of many cave paintings remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Were they hunting rituals, teaching tools, spiritual expressions, stories, perhaps something entirely different? No surviving voice explains them. Only the walls remain. An elderly woman raises her torch toward a section of smooth limestone. Tiny handprints emerge from the darkness. Some belong to adults, others are noticeably smaller. Children. You quietly place your own hand nearby without touching the ancient marks. The fingers almost match. For one brief moment, 50,000 years seems to disappear. Someone once stood exactly here, breathing, watching the same firelight, listening to the same dripping water. That thought settles gently over everyone. Outside snow continues falling. Inside generations quietly meet. One young boy asks how the hands reached so high up on the wall. His grandfather smiles, then crouches. The child climbs onto his shoulders. Without another word, everyone understands. Some lessons need no explanation. Researchers studying prehistoric cave art have long noticed the surprising number of hand stencils created by blowing pigment around an outstretched hand pressed against the rock. Exactly why people created them remains uncertain. Some scholars believe they marked identity. Others suggest family groups. Still others imagine ceremonial meanings forever beyond recovery. Every explanation carries evidence. None carries certainty. The deeper you walk, the quieter everything becomes. The air grows cooler. Dampness clings to the stone beneath your fingertips. Your torch crackles softly, releasing the comforting smell of burning pine resin. Ahead, another chamber opens unexpectedly. This one contains no paintings. Instead, several carefully arranged stones form a rough circle surrounding an old fireplace blackened by countless ancient fires. Ash still lingers beneath loose dust. Loo cold, never forgotten. People gathered here. Many times, they cooked, rested, talked, perhaps laughed, perhaps grieved. The fire left no stories behind, only charcoal. Archaeological hearths found within prehistoric caves often provide remarkable information about daily life. Burned seeds, animal bones, charcoal fragments, and stone tools allow researchers to reconstruct meal seasons, of occupation, and even types of wood selected for fuel. Yet fires rarely preserve conversation. Those disappeared into the smoke. A young woman kneels beside one wall where unusual scratches cover the limestone. Not random, parallel, deep. An elder examines them briefly. Bear. Liu ago. Cave bears occupied many European caves throughout the Ice Age, sometimes long before humans arrived and occasionally after humans departed. Evidence suggests that people and bears periodically shared the same shelters across thousands of years, though rarely at exactly the same time. Historians continue debating how often direct encounters occurred. The cave itself remembers both visitors. It chooses no favorite. Further inside, as someone uncovers a small pouch wrapped carefully in leather. Red ochre. Again. The familiar mineral powder glows warmly beneath torchlight. An older artist mixes a little with rendered animal fat inside a shallow stone cup until it forms a thick crimson paste. Without ceremony, he begins adding several careful lines beside an unfinished animal figure. No one interrupts. Children watch quietly. The brush is not really a brush, only a small bundle of soft moss tied gently to a stick. The pigment spreads smoothly across the stone. Confident, practiced, calm. Historians know prehistoric artists used surprisingly diverse techniques. Pigments were applied with fingers brushes made from animal hair or plants, pads of moss, and even blown through hollow bird bones to create soft sprays of color. Exactly how artistic knowledge passed between generations remains uncertain. Perhaps around fires, perhaps inside caves like this, perhaps both. The final line is completed. The artist steps back. Nobody applauds. Instead, everyone simply looks, long enough to remember. Outside, afternoon sunlight has begun fading by the time your group leaves the cave. The cold feels sharper after hours beneath the earth. Fresh snow has covered your footprints from the morning journey. Only the cave entrance remains unchanged, watching silently from the hillside. It reveals little. It keeps much. As you descend toward the shelter, smoke rising from your camp becomes visible across the valley. Home. Warmth. Life. Behind you, the cave disappears gradually into gathering twilight. Its paintings remain inside. Its mysteries remain untouched. Its stories continue waiting for people who may never fully understand them. And perhaps that is part of their quiet beauty. Some things survive, not because every question has been answered, but because they continue inviting each new generation to wonder. As evening settles over, Ice Age Europe, once more you sit beside the familiar fire watching orange flames dance much like the torchlight upon ancient cave walls. The same light, different stones, one world connected by fire. Memory and images left quietly in the darkness, waiting patiently through winter after winter for curious eyes to find them again. Section 12. The cough begins before sunrise. It is soft, barely louder than the crackling fire. At first, you think someone has simply breathed in too much smoke during the night. Then the cough comes again, slower this time, deeper. An elderly hunter sitting near the edge of the shelter presses a fur-covered hand against his chest before quietly taking another careful breath. No one ignores it. Winter rarely allows small problems to remain small. Outside, another pale morning unfolds across the frozen valley. Fresh frost coats every branch and the air feels so cold that each breath seems to freeze before leaving your mouth. Smoke rises straight upward through the opening in the shelter roof, carrying with it the familiar sense of pine resin roasted meat and well-worn leather. Inside, the atmosphere changes, not fearful, attentive. You kneel beside the older man while one of the community's most experienced women places the back of her hand gently against his forehead. She closes her eyes for a moment, listening to his breathing more carefully than his words. She asks only a few quiet questions. Does your chest hurt? Then you breathe deeply. Did the cough begin yesterday? He answers with slow nods. She listens. Not just to him, to everything. Modern hospitals do not exist. Neither do medicines sealed inside neat little bottles. Yet your people are far from helpless. Across Ice Age, Europe's survival depended upon understanding the human body almost as carefully as understanding the weather. Generations observed which plants eased pain, which smokes irritated the lungs, which wounds healed cleanly, and which illnesses spread among families. Knowledge arrived slowly. Experience remembered it. The older woman reaches toward a leather pouch hanging beside the shelter wall. Inside rests an assortment of carefully gathered treasures. Dried willow bark, bundles of aromatic herbs, pieces of birch fungus, several roots collected months earlier, yes, before the ground froze solid. Each has been wrapped separately. Each carries a purpose. Historians generally agree that prehistoric people possessed surprisingly detailed knowledge of their natural environment, including medicinal plants. Direct evidence is understandably limited because organic materials decay quickly, yet pollen analysis, preserved plant remains, dental calculus, and comparisons with traditional hunter-gatherer cultures all suggest that ancient communities understood far more about healing than was once believed. Exactly which remedies existed 50,000 years ago remains debated. Nature offered many possibilities. Only some left traces. The woman selects a few strips of willow bark. She places them into a carved stone bowl before adding hot water heated with fire-warmed rocks. Steam rises gently into the cool shelter air. The scent is earthy, slightly bitter, not unpleasant. Modern science has shown that willow bark contains compounds related to salicylic acid, one of the natural substances that eventually inspired aspirin thousands of years later. Whether Ice Age Europeans intentionally used willow specifically for pain relief cannot always be proven, but the possibility fits remarkably well with what later cultures independently discovered. Sometimes observation arrives before explanation. The body learns first. Science follows much later. The older hunter accepts the warm drink gratefully and sips slowly. No miracle follows. Healing rarely happens that way. Instead, everyone quietly adjusts the day's responsibilities. Another hunter volunteers to gather firewood. Someone else takes over repairing a damaged carrying frame. The sick man is encouraged to remain beside the warmth of the fire. No one complains. Illness belongs to the whole community, not only the individual. You notice something else. The shelter itself receives attention. Fresh snow packed against the outer walls is inspected for gaps where cold air might slip inside. Damp bedding is carried outdoors briefly beneath the pale winter sun before being shaken and replaced. Cleanliness matters, even here. Researchers increasingly believe prehistoric people paid closer attention to hygiene than older stereotypes suggested. Smoke helped discourage insects. Waste was often carried away from living areas. Sleeping spaces appear to have been organized deliberately at many archaeological sites. Historians continue discussing exactly how systematic these practices became. Evidence survives in fragments. Patterns slowly emerge. As midday approaches, two younger members of the band leave the shelter carrying woven baskets. Not to hunt, to gather. Even during winter, useful plants can still be found if you know where to look. They travel toward a sheltered hillside where evergreen trees protect patches of ground from the deepest snow. Beneath the branches, they uncover clusters of moss, evergreen needles, and small shrubs whose leaves remain surprisingly green despite the season. The forest hides gifts. For patient eyes, one young woman carefully harvests fragrant pine needles. Their sharp scent fills the cold air immediately. Some later traditions across northern Europe and Asia brewed evergreen needles into warm infusions rich in vitamin C, though historians still debate exactly how widespread similar practices may have been during the Ice Age. The evidence remains incomplete. The idea remains compelling. Nearby, another gatherer discovers a shelf fungus growing upon the side of a dead birch tree. She smiles quietly. The fungus is collected with careful hands. Birch fungi have long attracted attention for their practical properties. Certain species burn slowly, making excellent tinder, while others have been investigated for possible medicinal uses by both ancient and modern cultures. Whether every Ice Age community recognized these qualities remains uncertain. Different forests teach different lessons. Back at camp, the older hunter's breathing has grown steadier. Not perfect, simply calmer. The warmth helps. The company helps too. No one leaves him alone. Children continue playing nearby, though more quietly than usual. One little girl brings him a smooth stone she found beside the stream before winter froze it over. It has no medicinal value. It still matters. She places it gently into his hand. Her smiles. Sometimes kindness becomes part of treatment. You spend the afternoon repairing a pair of fur boots worn thin after weeks of walking across packed snow. As you stitch fresh leather over the damaged sole, you notice the remarkable efficiency of bone needles. Small, strong, elegant. Nearby, another woman gently massages rendered animal fat into cracked hands reddened by constant exposure to freezing air. Winter injures slowly. Healing requires equal patience. Outside sunlight begins fading earlier than anyone wishes. The air grows noticeably colder. A flock of raven circles above the valley before disappearing toward distant cliffs. The day's work gradually slows. Evening approaches. Dinner. Tonight is warm marrow broth enriched with small pieces of smoked reindeer meat and the last handful of preserved roots gathered before snowfall. Simple food. Comforting food. The older hunter finishes nearly the entire bowl. Everyone notices. No one comments. Hope often speaks most clearly through silence. After the meal, an elder begins telling a familiar story. It describes a woman many winters ago who recovered from a terrible injury after her family carried her during migration instead of leaving her behind. The children listen, and the children listen carefully. So do the adults. Modern archaeologists have uncovered prehistoric skeletons showing severe injuries that healed over many months, including broken bones, damaged limbs, and significant disabilities. Such recoveries would have been impossible without long-term care provided by others. Compassion leaves fossils too, not directly, but unmistakably. Historians generally agree that cooperation formed one of humanity's greatest evolutionary strengths. Exactly how different communities organized caregiving undoubtedly varied, yet the evidence repeatedly suggests something profoundly familiar. People looked after one another, even when it was difficult, even when resources were scarce. The fire burns lower as night deepens. The cough comes only once, then not again. Outside the frozen valley lies beneath another canopy of brilliant stars. Inside, warmth settles gently over sleeping families wrapped in carefully sewn hides. Tomorrow may bring perfect health, or another illness. No one can know. Yet you understand something that feels quietly remarkable. The greatest medicine available during an Ice Age winter is not found only in bark, herbs, smoke, or carefully gathered fungi. It also lives in shared meals, patient hands, gentle voices, the willingness to carry another person's burden when their own strength briefly fades. Long before hospitals rose from stone or medicine-filled glass bottles, healing had already found its oldest home, around a fire, among people who refused to let anyone face the winter alone. Section 13. The night seems endless, not because you are afraid, because darkness arrives so early that it feels as though the sun has forgotten your valley entirely. You finish the evening meal while the last faint glow still lingers along the western horizon. Within minutes, the world outside becomes a deep ocean of blue and black. Snow reflects the stars with surprising brightness, yet beyond the reach of your fire, every tree dissolves into shadow. Winter has stolen the daylight. For now, you pull another fur blanket over your shoulders and settle closer to the hearth. The warmth reaches your face first, then your hands, while your feet remain stubbornly cold despite thick boots lined with dried grass. The fire sighs softly. A log shifts. Tiny sparks spiral upward through the smoke hole before disappearing into the frozen night. You watch them vanish. It becomes strangely calming. During the deepest weeks of Ice Age winter, daylight may last only a few precious hours, depending upon where your people travel. The long evenings reshape life itself. Work continues while sunlight remains, but once darkness settles across the valley, movement slows naturally. The night asks different things of you. Not speed, not strength, patience. An older woman begins repairing a tear in a wolf-hide cloak. She works close to the fire where the light is strongest. Every few moments she pauses, holding the leather toward the flames to inspect the tiny stitches before continuing again. The needle glides smoothly. The sinew tightens. No words are spoken. The silence feels comfortable. Across the shelter, two hunters carefully sharpen stone spear points. Small flakes of a flint fall onto a waiting hide spread beneath their knees. Click! Click! Pause. The rhythm blends gently with the crackling fire. Even ordinary sounds become companions during the long darkness. Children finish their evening meal and gather beside one of the elders. Nobody asks whether there will be a story. Everyone already knows. Stories belong to winter. The elder waits until every restless movement settles before speaking. His voice remains soft enough that everyone naturally leans closer to hear. He tells of a fox clever enough to trick a hungry wolf into chasing shadows across frozen rivers, while the fox quietly escaped with a forgotten rabbit. The children laugh. Not loudly, just enough. Then the elder pauses. What saved the fox? One little boy answers immediately. He ran faster. The elder smiles gently. No. Silence. A young girl whispers. He watched carefully. The elder nods. The lesson hides inside the story. Always. Across countless generations. Storytelling has served purposes far beyond entertainment. Oral traditions preserved hunting routes, dangerous landscapes, seasonal changes, animal behavior, family histories, and practical wisdom long before writing ever existed. Memory became a library. People became its shelves. Historians generally agree that spoken traditions played an essential role in prehistoric societies, although exactly how stories were structured 50,000 years ago remains impossible to reconstruct. Perhaps some tales sounded surprisingly familiar. Perhaps others have vanished forever. The fire remembers none of them. Only the listeners do. Outside, the wind strengthens. You hear it first against the shelter walls, then across the valley, then through the pine trees. The sound rises and falls like distant waves rolling against an unseen shore. The children glance toward the entrance. No one looks frightened. They have heard winter breathing before. One hunter quietly checks the binding securing the mammoth bone frame. Everything remains tight. The shelter answers the wind with only an occasional creak. Good craftsmanship sleeps peacefully. You step outside for a moment, only briefly. Cold surrounds you instantly. The stars appear astonishingly bright tonight, scattered across the sky in numbers impossible to count. Without cities or artificial lights, the heavens stretch from horizon to horizon with breathtaking clarity. The Milky Way glows softly overhead, a river of light, frozen across the darkness. You stand quietly beneath it. The air smells of clean snow, distant pine forests, and faint smoke drifting upward from your shelter. Far away an owl calls once. Nothing answers. Some scholars believe prehistoric people probably observed the night sky with extraordinary familiarity. Seasonal stars may have helped track changing times of year, while repeated celestial patterns likely became woven into stories, traditions, or symbolic beliefs. Exactly how much astronomical knowledge existed remains uncertain. The evidence is mostly silence. The stars continue shining anyway. You notice one elderly hunter sitting alone beside the edge of camp. He is not lonely, simply thinking. His eyes remain fixed upon the northern sea. Perhaps he remembers winters long before you were born. Perhaps he counts seasons differently now. Perhaps he simply enjoys the quiet. Old age carries its own conversations. The firelight from the shelter glows warmly behind you. It forms a small island of orange surrounded by endless darkness. You suddenly understand how precious that light truly is, not because it chases away every danger, because it gives people somewhere to gather. Inside once more, the atmosphere has grown even calmer. One child has already fallen asleep with a carved antler figure still resting in small hands. Another quietly leans against a parent's shoulder while listening to the final lines of the evening story. Nobody hurries bedtime. Winter nights provide time. An older woman begins humming softly. No words, only melody. The tune rises gently above the crackling fire before fading into silence. You wonder how old it might be. 10 winters, 100, 1,000. No answer exists. Music rarely leaves fossils. Yet archaeologists have discovered prehistoric flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory, dating back tens of thousands of years. These remarkable instruments suggest that music already held an important place in human life during the Ice Age. Historians still debate exactly how such music sounded. Slow, joyful, ceremonial, comforting, perhaps all of those. The melody inside your shelter ends almost as quietly as it began. Nobody applauds. No performance has taken place. Only life. The fire burns lower. One by one, glowing logs collapse inward, forming a bed of steady red embers. A younger hunter carefully adds a single piece of hardwood rather than several. Enough to last. Not enough to waste. Outside snow begins falling again. Large flakes drift silently through the darkness, illuminated briefly whenever they pass above the smoke hole. The storm arrives gently, almost politely. You settle beneath heavy reindeer hides, feeling the rough fur against your hands and the welcome warmth trapped beneath the blankets. Around you, breathing slows. One person shifts quietly. Another sighs. The shelter gradually fills with the peaceful sounds of people surrendering to sleep. The fire keeps watch. Tomorrow will bring more work, more tracking, more gathering, more decisions. Winter has not grown easier, neither have you. As your eyes begin closing, the elder's story returns to your thoughts. The clever fox survived because it watched carefully. Perhaps that lesson belongs to everyone here. You survive not by overpowering the frozen world, but by paying attention to it, listening to the wind, watching the stars, remembering old stories, sharing quiet songs, finding comfort in one another, while the longest nights slowly pass overhead. Beyond the shelter, darkness still stretches across Ice Age Europe. Inside, surrounded by warm light, gentle voices, and sleeping companions, you discover that the longest nights are not measured only by hours. They are measured by how well people carry one another until morning finally returns. Section 14. Morning arrives with a strange kind of brightness. The sky is still pale. The air is still bitterly cold, yet something feels different. You cannot explain it immediately. The wind has softened just enough to carry a faint scent of running water somewhere beyond the frozen valley. It is not the smell of spring, that season remains far away. Instead, it is simply a reminder that beneath the ice rivers have never truly stopped moving. Nothing sleeps forever, not even winter. Today your band must travel. The stores of firewood remain healthy. The shelter stands firm and the preserved meat hangs safely above slow, smoking fires. But another necessity calls you away. Stone, not just any stone, the right stone. Flint, suitable for replacing worn spear points, lies several miles away near an exposed ridge where the snow rarely settles deeply. The journey will also allow everyone to observe fresh animal movements across a part of the valley not visited since before the last storm. Travel serves many purposes, rarely only one. You fasten your fur cloak securely and adjust the leather straps around your boots. The dried grass packed inside still feels remarkably warm after several days of use. Beside you, another traveller checks the bindings, holding a small bundle of smoked meat, a stone knife, spare sinew cord, and a tightly rolled hide blanket. Everyone carries only what matters. Weight steals energy. Energy keeps you alive. The group leaves camp shortly after sunrise. Behind you, thin columns of smoke continue rising peacefully from the shelter, watched over by several older members of the community who remain behind. Ahead stretches an endless white landscape broken only by scattered pines, low ridges, and frozen waterways winding through the valley. The snow squeaks softly beneath each step, a sound heard only in deep cold. Your breath settles into a steady rhythm. Walking through winter requires its own pace. Too fast and sweat soaks your clothing before freezing against your skin. Too slow and valuable daylight disappears before reaching your destination. Balance matters, as always. The frozen river appears before long. Its broad surface glitters beneath the morning sun, looking almost like polished stone rather than water. Snow has drifted unevenly across the ice, hiding cracks as ridges and old pressure lines formed weeks earlier. No one sets onto it immediately. Everyone waits. The oldest hunter walks ahead alone. He carries no spear in his hands, only a long wooden staff. With every few steps, he strikes the ice firmly. Thump. Pause. Thump. The sound travels beneath your feet, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull. He listens more carefully than he looks. Ice speaks, if you know its language. Generations of experience have taught your people how frozen rivers behave. Thick blue ice usually offers safety. Fresh white layers may conceal weaker surfaces. Places where currents run swiftly beneath often remain thinner than the surrounding sheet even after weeks of severe cold. The river remembers only movement, even beneath winter's grip. Modern researchers studying traditional Arctic and subarctic communities have documented remarkably sophisticated knowledge of ice conditions passed orally across generations. While direct evidence from 50,000 years ago is naturally limited, many archaeologists believe Ice Age people possessed similarly detailed understanding developed through countless winters of observation. Historians still debate exactly how extensive that knowledge became. The river offers clues, not written instructions. The elder finally nods. Safe enough. The group crosses one by one, leaving generous space between each traveller. The ice groans softly beneath your boots. Not loudly, just enough to remind everyone that confidence should never become carelessness. You keep walking. Halfway across you stop for only a moment. Looking downward through a clear patch of ice, you glimpse dark water flowing steadily beneath your feet. Silent. Unstoppable. It has travelled all winter without freezing completely. The sight feels strangely comforting. Life continues below, even when hidden. On the far bank, fresh tracks interrupt the untouched snow. Not reindeer. Horse. Several animals. Traveling west. Their hoof prints remain crisp despite yesterday's light snowfall. The hunters kneel together, studying the trail without speaking. One notices broken reeds protruding through the snow near the riverbank. Another points toward fresh droppings still unfrozen. The horses passed recently, perhaps before dawn, perhaps while everyone slept. No one pursues them today. Observation alone has value. As the journey continues, the landscape gradually changes. The open valley narrows into gentle hills where limestone outcrops emerge through the snow. Wind has swept many rocky surfaces completely clear, revealing patches of frozen earth and scattered flint nodules waiting among the stones. This is why you came. Several people immediately begin searching. Not randomly. Experience guides their eyes. Good flint possesses certain colors, certain textures. When struck gently against another stone, you pick up one promising piece. Dark gray, smooth, dense. An older craftsperson taps it lightly using a rounded hammerstone. The clear ringing note brings a quiet smile. Good stone. It joins the gathering pile. Archaeologists have identified prehistoric flint quarries and workshop sites throughout Europe where early humans repeatedly returned to obtain high-quality raw materials. Some locations were visited for thousands of years, suggesting extraordinary geographical memory spanning many generations. Stone outlived people. Memory returned to it. Exactly how ownership of these places worked remains uncertain. Perhaps neighboring groups shared access peacefully. Perhaps agreements shifted over time. The evidence leaves room for many possibilities. While others continue collecting stone, you wander a short distance toward the crest of the ridge. The view steals your breath. The valley spreads endlessly below. Your camp appears only as a tiny thread of smoke rising above snow-covered trees. Far beyond, dark lines of moving animals cross the plains. Reindeer again. Their migration never truly stops. Even farther north, enormous shapes drift slowly across the white horizon. Mammoths. Almost too distant to believe. You stand quietly, listening. The wind carries faint sounds impossible to identify with certainty. Perhaps ravens, perhaps wolves, perhaps only the frozen landscape settling beneath another cold day. Sometimes uncertainty becomes part of beauty. By midday, the gathered flint fills several leather carrying bags. No one takes a more than needed. Heavy loads make dangerous journeys home. The return begins beneath a sky gradually filling with high, thin clouds. The sunlight softens. The wind changes direction. Almost immediately, several adults notice another weather shift. The valley keeps offering reminders. As you approach the frozen river once more, something unexpected catches your attention. A line of footprints. Human. Not yours. Fresh. Smaller than the travelers who visited several days earlier. Perhaps another family crossed this way while your people remained safely in camp. The tracks continue eastward before disappearing over a snowy rise. No one follows. Instead, everyone pauses for a quiet moment. You are not alone in this immense frozen world. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another fire burns. Another child laughs. Another elder tells familiar stories beside glowing embers. The thought feels reassuring. Crossing the river again proves uneventful. Soon the familiar scent of pine smoke drifts gently through the afternoon air. Home. The shelter appears exactly where you left it, standing proudly beneath fresh snow, its mammoth bone frame supporting thick hides that glow warmly in the fading light. Children run forward. They immediately begin examining the newly gathered flint with wide eyes, turning each stone over as though holding tiny treasures. In many ways they are. Inside the shelter, evening settles peacefully once again. Freshly collected flint rests beside the fire, waiting to become tomorrow's spear point scrapers, knives and drills. The journey has ended successfully. Not because great dangers were overcome, not because extraordinary discoveries were made, because ordinary knowledge guided every step. Knowing how to read ice, how to recognize good stone, how to travel without exhausting yourself, how to notice distant weather before it arrived. The wisdom seems simple, until you imagine surviving without it. As darkness wraps itself around the valley, once more you watch sparks drift upward through the smoke hole toward a sky already filling with stars. Another day has quietly become another lesson, and like the frozen river beneath your feet, those lessons continue flowing forward, carrying your people summarily through one more winter in the vast, beautiful wilderness of Ice Age Europe. Section 15. You notice the mammoths long before you hear them. The first sign is not their towering shape upon the snowy plain. It is the trembling beneath your feet, almost too gentle to feel. A slow rhythmic vibration passes through the frozen ground as though the earth itself has begun breathing beneath its blanket of snow. Nearby, a raven suddenly lifts from the top of a pine tree and glides silently toward higher ground. The hunters stop walking. No one speaks. Everyone waits. Then they appear. At first they seem like distant hills moving against the horizon. One enormous adult, another beside it. Two younger animals following closely between them. Their long shaggy coats ripple gently beneath the winter wind, while curved ivory tusks catch the pale afternoon sunlight. Every deliberate step sends tiny clouds of powdery snow drifting around their massive length. The valley suddenly feels much smaller. The mammoths belong to it. You are merely visiting. Modern people often imagine mammoths only as gigantic sources of meat, but standing before living animals tells a different story. They command attention without asking for it. Their quiet confidence fills the landscape far more completely than their enormous size alone. Nobody rushes closer. Respect keeps a sensible distance. The herd moves steadily toward a patch of exposed grasses where the wind has swept away much of the snow. The oldest female walks first, pausing occasionally to sweep her powerful trunk across the ground before scraping aside snow with one enormous foot. The younger animals copy her. Learning begins immediately, just as it does among humans. Historians generally agree that woolly mammoths formed close family groups remarkably similar in structure to modern elephants. Fossil evidence suggests experienced females probably guided herds across familiar migration routes, while younger animals learned survival through observation and imitation. Some things change little across thousands of generations. Wisdom often walks at the front. You crouch behind a cluster of snow-covered shrubs, watching quietly. The wind favors you. Your scent drifts harmlessly away from the herd. One calf suddenly swings its trunk toward another, sending a spray of loose snow into the air. The older animal beside it responds with what almost looks like gentle patience, nudging the youngster back toward the feeding area. The moment feels surprisingly familiar. Parents everywhere understand distraction. The hunters smile, only slightly. Despite their enormous value, mammoths are not hunted today. The herd is healthy, alert, moving together. Attempting an attack would risk terrible injuries with little guarantee of success. Even experienced hunters understand that wisdom sometimes means letting opportunity walk away. Survival rewards judgment, not recklessness. Some archaeologists believe mammoth hunts were relatively uncommon compared with the frequent hunting of reindeer horses or bison. Others argue that organized mammoth hunting occurred more regularly in regions where these giants gathered seasonally. The evidence remains incomplete. Massive bones survive. The decisions behind them rarely do. As the herd gradually disappears beyond a gentle rise, your group continues toward a place known well by generations before you. A field of old bones. Scattered across the snow lie weathered mammoth ribs, vertebrae, fragments of tusk and broad shoulder blades bleached pale by years of wind and sunlight. None belong to recent deaths. Time has already claimed the flesh, leaving only durable reminders of lives once lived. No sadness fills their place, only usefulness. Several adults begin examining the bones carefully. One long rib remains remarkably slurred. Another has split from repeated freezing and thawing. A broad shoulder blade still feels strong enough to serve another purpose. Nature rarely wastes. Neither do your people. You help lift the shoulder blade. Even after years exposed to the elements, it remains astonishingly heavy. Smooth along one side and gently curved, it could become part of a shelter wall, a windbreak, or perhaps a working surface inside camp. Nearby, another hunter discovers an intact section of tusk partially buried beneath drifting snow. Its creamy surface glows softly beneath the winter sun. Everyone admires it. Nobody rushes to carve it. Good ivory deserves careful planning. Throughout Ice Age Europe, mammoth ivory became one of the most remarkable materials available. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully carved figurines, beads, pendants, spear components, musical instruments and decorative objects fashioned from tusks tens of thousands of years ago. The craftsmanship still amazes experts today. Exactly how knowledge of ivory carving spread across different communities remains uncertain. Some techniques may have traveled astonishing distances. Others may have been rediscovered again and again. You continue searching among the scattered remains. One vertebra catches your attention. Its central opening is wide enough to pass your arm through. The surface feels polished by countless winters, each season smoothing tiny imperfections left by age. You imagine the animal that once carried it, towering, patient, endlessly moving across frozen grasslands. The thought lingers. Back at camp, every part of a mammoth finds purpose. Large bones support shelters. Ribs become structural beams. Skulls sometimes anchor walls against fierce winds. Tusks transform into tools, ornaments, and works of art. Sinew provides exceptionally strong cordage. Hide, when available, offers enormous sheets of durable covering. Even fat serves as valuable fuel and nourishment. Nothing stands alone. Everything connects. Researchers studying several famous prehistoric sites in Eastern Europe have discovered circular dwellings constructed using dozens of mammoth bones arranged with extraordinary care. Historians generally agree these structures demonstrate remarkable planning, though. Scholars continue debating whether all such dwellings served as permanent winter homes or temporary seasonal camps. Bones become architecture. Long after life has departed. The journey back toward camp proceeds slowly beneath gathering afternoon clouds. Several people carry carefully selected bones balanced across their shoulders using leather straps. Others transport smaller pieces of ivory wrapped securely inside hides to prevent damage. The loads are heavy. No one complains. Every step represents future comfort. A child waiting near the shelter spots the approaching group first. He points excitedly toward the great curved rib resting across one hunter's shoulders. It came from a mammoth. His voice carries genuine wonder. The adults smile. Wonder survives every generation. Inside, the shelter work begins immediately. The newly collected rib is measured against an aging support beam beginning to show signs of weakness. Two experienced builders compare the shapes carefully before deciding it will fit almost perfectly. The replacement can wait until spring. Knowing it is available brings quiet reassurance. Nearby, an elderly artisan unwraps the section of mammoth tusk. He turns it slowly beneath the firelight. No carving begins tonight. Instead, he simply studies the natural curves hidden within the ivory. Good craftspeople often see possibilities before making the first cut. Patience shapes beauty. A young girl sits beside him watching every movement. Finally, she asks what the tusk will become. He considers the question for several moments. "I don't know yet." She looks surprised. He smiles gently. "The ivory will tell us." The answer sounds mysterious. Perhaps it is. Perhaps every skilled craft begins by listening before creating. As evening settles over the valley, another hearty meal warms the shelter. Outside, snow drifts quietly across old mammoth tracks already beginning to fade beneath fresh flakes. The giants continue their endless journey somewhere beyond the hills. Your people continue theirs here beside the fire. Though separated by size, both lives remain woven together in remarkable ways. Without mammoths, surviving these winters would have been far more difficult. Without humans, the mammoths would simply have remained another magnificent creature wandering the Ice Age plains. Together, knowingly or not, both shape the history of a frozen continent. You settle beneath your familiar fur blankets, listening to the soft crackle of burning wood while mammoth bones silently support the shelter above your head. The firelight dances across their smooth white curves. They no longer walk the valleys, yet even now they continue protecting life through another long winter night. Section 60. The snow falls so lightly that it almost seems suspended in the air. Each flake drifts without urgency, settling upon mammoth bones outside the shelter. Pine branches bending beneath their growing weight and the footprints left by children earlier that morning. Winter moves quietly today. So do your people. The day's practical work has already begun. Meat continues smoking beside a slow fire. Fresh flint gathered from the ridge is being shaped into spear points. Several women soften newly cured hides by pulling them rhythmically over smooth wooden poles. Yet beneath these familiar routines, another kind of activity unfolds. One that serves no obvious practical purpose, at least not at first glance. Near the entrance of the shelter, an elderly woman sits with a small leather pouch resting across her lap. She unties it carefully, almost ceremonially, revealing a collection of tiny objects gathered over many years. A polished fox tooth, a pierced shell carried from a distant coastline, several beads carved from ivory, a smooth pebble streaked naturally with red. None are large, none are necessary for survival, yet each one receives the same gentle attention as a finely crafted spear. You kneel beside her. She lifts the fox tooth toward the firelight. Its surface glows softly worn smooth by countless fingers. Then she threads it onto a narrow sinew cord beside several ivory beads. No explanation follows. None seems required. Long before coins written, names or family portraits, people carried small objects whose importance extended beyond their material value. Across Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have uncovered necklaces made from animal teeth, bracelets fashioned from shells, pendants carved from mammoth ivory, and beads shaped from bone and stone. The craftsmanship is undeniable. Their meaning remains wonderfully mysterious. Historians generally agree these ornaments carried significance beyond decoration, yet exactly what that significance was continues to inspire a lively debate. Did they represent family, achievement, friendship, protection, identity? Perhaps different communities understood them differently. The objects remain, their stories whisper. A young girl watches the elderly woman string another bead onto the cord. Finally, curiosity wins. "Why do you wear them?" The old woman smiles. She pauses before answering. "So I remember." The child nods thoughtfully. Perhaps she understands. Perhaps she simply likes the answer. Memory takes many forms. Outside, several hunters prepare for a short journey to inspect distant animal trails. Before leaving, one quietly reaches beneath his fur clothing and touches a small pendant hanging against his chest. The gesture lasts only a heartbeat. Then he shoulders his spear and walks into the snow. No one comments. Small habits often reveal deep beliefs. Researchers have discovered personal ornaments dating back tens of thousands of years across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Some were carefully shaped from eagle talons, others from perforated animal teeth shells transported remarkable distances or carefully polished pieces of ivory. The effort required to create them was considerable. Someone believed they mattered. Exactly why remains uncertain. One influential theory suggests ornaments helped identify members of particular communities, allowing strangers to recognize shared connections during rare meetings across enormous landscapes. Another proposes symbolic or spiritual meanings. Others believe they reflected personal achievement or family relationships. Perhaps every explanation contains part of the truth. Winter itself encourages reflection. The long evenings provide time unavailable during frantic seasons of migration or abundant hunting. Practical work continues, yet conversation drifts naturally toward older stories. One elder begins describing a mountain no one in the shelter's youngest generation has ever seen. It stands beyond 3 frozen rivers. His hands sketch its outline in the air. The snow never leaves its highest stones. The children listen quietly. To them, the mountain exists entirely through words. Knowledge often travels farther than people. Nearby, another elder gently unwraps a bundle protected within several layers of leather. Inside rests something extraordinary. A small ivory carving, barely longer than your thumb. Its shape resembles a mammoth standing with trunk lowered toward the ground. The proportions are remarkably graceful despite its tiny size. Every curve appears intentional, every line confident. You turn it carefully beneath the firelight. The surface feels warm despite the cold day outside, not because of temperature, because another person's hands shaped it with remarkable patience. Archaeologists have uncovered astonishing prehistoric figurines throughout Europe, including animals carved from mammoth ivory with remarkable realism. Some date to roughly 40,000 years ago, or slightly later, revealing artistic traditions of extraordinary sophistication. Exactly when such carving first emerged remains an area of continuing research. Innovation rarely appears all at once. It grows quietly. Like families, the elder accepts the carving back carefully. It belonged to my mother's mother. Whether those exact words reflect historical reality or symbolic storytelling hardly matters. What matters is continuity. Objects outlive people. Memories outlive objects. The fire burns steadily. Outside, ravens land upon nearby branches before hopping curiously towards scraps left after yesterday's meal. One bird pauses beside a polished antler tool lying temporarily upon the snow. It tilts its head, studies it, then loses interest. The children laugh softly. Even clever ravens cannot understand every human treasure. As afternoon settles over the valley, another activity begins. Several adults gather near a broad stretch of untouched snow. One kneels. Using a stick, she draws several simple lines. A river, a ridge, a stand of pine. Then small marks representing camps visited many winters before. The children gather immediately. It is not a game. It is memory becoming visible. The drawing disappears with the next snowfall. The lesson remains. Historians believe oral maps, mental landscapes preserved through stories, landmarks and repeated journeys played an essential role in prehistoric survival. Some researchers argue these mental maps became astonishingly detailed, allowing communities to navigate territories spanning hundreds of miles without written directions. The land itself became the archive. No parchment required. As evening approaches, the hunters return. They bring little meat. Only news has moved farther west. Fresh wolf tracks cross the frozen river. The mammoths continue following their familiar route northward. Information matters, sometimes more than food. Everyone listens carefully. Each observation joins hundreds remembered from previous winters. Patterns slowly emerge. The valley reveals itself one season at a time. After supper, someone places fresh pine branches upon the fire. A rich fragrance immediately fills the shelter. Sharp, clean, almost sweet. The smoke curls upward through the roof opening while tiny sparks drift into the darkness beyond. The atmosphere feels peaceful. One young boy notices the necklace worn by the elderly woman. He points toward the fox tooth. Will I wear it someday? She considers the question. Perhaps. He smiles proudly. Then she adds another thought. If you remember why. A frown slightly. What if I forget? The old woman reaches over and gently taps his forehead. That is why we tell stories. Silence follows. Comfortable silence. The kind shared only among people who understand one another without many words. Outside snow continues falling gently across the valley. Each flake quietly covers another footprint, another branch, another stone. Inside memories remain uncovered. Researchers continue debating many aspects of Ice Age spiritual life. Burials, ornaments, pigments, carvings, and symbolic objects all hint at rich inner worlds, yet historians still disagree about exactly what early modern humans believed, hoped, or feared beyond everyday survival. Perhaps certainty is impossible. Perhaps mystery belongs here. As you settle, beneath warm reindeer hides, watching the firelight dance across necklaces, carved ivory, polished teeth, and weathered hands, you realize something quietly profound. Long before temples rose from stone, long before books preserved history, long before anyone wrote a single word, people were already carrying pieces of meaning close to their hearts, not because they understood every mystery surrounding them, but because the frozen world felt a little less vast when memories, stories, and small treasured objects traveled together through another long winter night. Section 17. You wake before anyone calls your name. Or name. Something feels wrong, not frightening, different. The shelter is colder than usual. The fire still glows beneath a layer of grey ash, yet the familiar warmth seems weaker. You pull your reindeer hide closer around your shoulders and notice tiny crystals of frost clinging to the inside of the shelter roof. Even the walls are freezing. Outside dawn has not truly arrived. The sky is a dull sheet of iron-grey cloud stretching from one horizon to the other. The wind carries a sharper edge than it has in many days, slicing between the trees with a steady whistle that never quite stops. Winter has changed again. You step beyond the shelter. The cold strikes immediately. Your breath forms thick clouds that linger unusually long before drifting away. The air feels heavier, somehow almost brittle, and every exposed patch of skin protests within seconds. The valley looks unfamiliar. Yesterday's gentle snow has become long ribbons of hard-packed drifts sculpted by relentless wind. Pine branches bow beneath fresh ice instead of soft powder. Even the ravens remain hidden. The wilderness has grown quieter. Too quiet. An older hunter walks slowly to the edge of camp. He kneels, scoops a handful of snow, lets it fall through his fingers. Then he looks towards the northern horizon. No words. He does not need them. Everyone understands a true cold front has arrived. Historians generally agree that Ice Age climates were not simply cold all the time. Conditions could change dramatically over remarkably short periods. Sudden drops in temperature, fierce winds sweeping from nearby glaciers, and prolonged storms could transform familiar landscapes into places almost impossible to travel. Exactly how rapidly these shifts occurred in different regions remains an active field of study. Ancient ice cores preserve remarkable clues. They rarely preserve individual stories. The day's plans disappear immediately. Nobody discusses hunting. Nobody gathers flint. Nobody explores distant valleys. Today's goal is much simpler. Stay warm. You join several others carrying additional firewood from a protected storage pile hidden beneath overlapping hides. Each bundle feels heavier than usual because stiff fingers struggle to grip frozen branches. The wood creaks softly. Even the trees sound cold. Inside the shelter, everyone begins working without being asked. Fresh moss is pressed into tiny gaps between overlapping hides. Loose bindings are tightened around mammoth bone supports. Extra bedding is spread across sleeping areas. The smallest children remain closest to the fire. The oldest adults sit there too. Heat belongs where it is needed most. The fire receives careful attention, not larger flames, steady ones. A younger hunter places thick hardwood logs across glowing embers instead of feeding the blaze with quick-burning twigs. The flames remain modest, but the coals beneath grow deeper and hotter. The shelter slowly begins warming again. Patience works, even against winter. You notice something else. Nobody moves unnecessarily. Every trip outside is planned. Every task serves more than one purpose. One woman collecting snow for water also checks the smoking rack. A hunter carrying wood also inspects animal tracks near camp. A teenager retrieving tools also gathers loose branches exposed by the wind. Energy becomes precious. Nothing is wasted. Modern studies of survival in extremely cold environments confirm something your people already understand through experience. Every unnecessary movement burns calories that must later be replaced. Conserving energy often becomes as important as acquiring food itself. Warmth is earned, not given. By midday, the storm finally arrives. Not gently. The wind rises with startling speed. driving sharp grains of snow across the valley until the distant trees disappear behind swirling white curtains. The world shrinks. The nearest pine, the shelter wall, the fire. Everything beyond becomes uncertain. The sound is astonishing. Wind roars across the open plain like an endless river, rattling branches shaking, hide coverings and forcing smoke sideways as it escapes through the roof opening. Conversation grows difficult. People lean closer together. The mammoth bone frame groans softly, not dangerously, just enough to remind everyone that winter never stops testing what humans build. A little boy looks toward the entrance. Will it break? His mother smiles calmly. No. She reaches upward and gently pats one of the great ribs arching above them. It has survived many winters. The child seems satisfied. Trust can be borrowed. Until experience creates your own, outside visibility falls even farther. One hunter briefly opens the entrance flap to secure an additional leather covering. Instantly icy wind bursts inside, carrying snowflakes that dance wildly through the shelter before settling across the floor. The flap closes. Silence returns. The difference feels astonishing. Home is only a few layers of hideaway from chaos. Archaeologists studying prehistoric shelters often marvel at the engineering hidden within apparently simple structures. Proper placement of entrances, overlapping hides insulation from grasses and moss, and carefully positioned hearths could dramatically improve comfort during severe weather. Historians continue debating exactly how standardized these designs became across Ice Age Europe. Necessity encouraged innovation. Every valley added its own solutions. The afternoon passes slowly, almost peacefully. There is nowhere else to go. Someone begins repairing leather gloves worn thin from weeks of gathering firewood. Another person shapes several fresh flint blades collected days earlier. Children carve simple figures into pieces of antler using surprisingly blunt stone tools under careful supervision. The storm traps everyone together. Nobody complains. Community grows strongest when travel becomes impossible. As evening approaches, the wind finally reaches its greatest strength. The shelter shudders once, twice, then settles. Snow piles higher against the outer walls, accidentally improving insulation by sealing tiny gaps where cold air once slipped inside. Winter attacks. Winter also protects. Nature often enjoys such contradiction. One elderly woman quietly laughs. She points toward the thickening snowbank pressed against the shelter. The wind is helping us. Everyone smiles. She is right. The snow forms an extra blanket around the lower walls, trapping warmth more effectively than bare hides alone. Sometimes your greatest enemy briefly becomes an unexpected ally. Dinner arrives later than usual. No elaborate meal. Only warm broth enriched with rendered fat, small pieces of smoked reindeer and crushed dried roots. The bowls warm frozen hands before they warm empty stomachs. Nobody rushes. Eating slowly helps. Outside darkness falls long before the storm weakens. The wind continues singing across the valley. Inside the fire burns brighter than ever. Children gradually drift to sleep beneath layers of carefully arranged hides. Adults remain awake a little longer, not because they fear the storm, because someone must watch the fire. One by one the night watch changes. Fresh wood, careful embers, gentle adjustments. The flames never disappear. Far beyond the shelter, wolves almost certainly wait out the blizzard beneath dense pine branches or sheltered ravines. Mammoths stand with broad backs turned toward the wind, protecting younger members of the herd. Foxes curl tightly beneath deep snow where surprisingly warm air becomes trapped. Every creature has a strategy. Humanity's strategy is each other. As you lie beneath your blankets, listening to the wind shake the shelter without breaking it, you understand why no one here measures strength by muscles alone. Real strength lives in shared work before the storm arrives, in storing wood when skies are clear, in repairing roofs before snow begins, in teaching children without rushing, in trusting elders who recognize danger hidden inside ordinary clouds. Winter has become cruel today, perhaps crueler than at any point this season, yet surrounded by steady firelight, familiar faces, carefully prepared food, and a shelter built through countless patient hands, you discover that the harshest storm cannot easily defeat people who have spent generations learning how to face it together. Section T. You notice the light before you notice the warmth. It is still cold. Very cold. Yet as you open your eyes, a pale ribbon of sunlight stretches a little farther across the shelter floor than it did only a few days ago. The change is almost impossible to measure unless you have lived through every long winter morning. The darkness is retreating, slowly, patiently. The great storm finally passed during the night. Outside the valley looks transformed once again. Snowdrifts rise like frozen waves around the shelter while pine branches sparkle beneath fresh layers of ice. The air feels astonishingly still after days of relentless wind. Silence returns, not empty silence, resting silence. You step outside wrapped tightly in your familiar wolf-hide cloak. The cold immediately brushes against your face, but something else greets you as well. Sunlight. Weak, gentle, real. It reflects from every snowy surface until the entire valley glows with soft golden white light. Even the distant glaciers shimmer, beneath the morning sky no longer hidden behind storm clouds. The world feels awake again. Round you, everyone notices. Nobody announces it. They simply smile a little more than yesterday. The children are the first to venture beyond the shelter. They leap across snowbanks left by the storm laughing as powder sprays into the crisp air. One slips almost immediately, disappearing waist-deep into a drift before climbing back out with snow covering nearly every piece of fur clothing. Everyone laughs, including the child. Winter still has its jokes. The hunters begin inspecting the camp, not because they expect disaster, because storms always rearrange the landscape. One mammoth bone support buried beneath drifting snow is uncovered with wooden shovels made from broad shoulder blades. Firewood stacks are checked carefully. Smoking racks remain standing, though one leather binding needs replacing after days of violent wind. The shelter survived well. Preparation worked. You help clear snow away from the entrance. Each scoop reveals familiar ground hidden beneath the white blanket. The packed earth feels strangely comforting after seeing nothing but snow for so many days. Sometimes ordinary things become extraordinary after absence. Nearby, an elderly woman pauses beside a cluster of pine trees. She kneels, touches one low branch gently. Tiny green needles still cling firmly beneath the ice. Life remained there all along. Hidden, evergreen trees hold quiet lesson. They do not fight winter. They endure it. Historians generally agree that Ice Age people developed remarkably detailed seasonal awareness, noticing subtle environmental changes, invisible to casual observers. Slight increases in daylight, shifts in animal movement, changing snow conditions, and even the behavior of birds helped signal the gradual approach of another seasonal transition. Exactly how accurately prehistoric people anticipated changing seasons remains uncertain. Nature offered countless clues. Human attention gathered them together. As the morning continues, the hunting party prepares to explore beyond the valley for the first time since the blizzard. Not a major expedition, only a careful survey. You join them. Fresh snow makes every track beautifully visible. The landscape has become another blank page waiting to be written upon. The first discovery arrives quickly. Hare tracks. Tiny. Light. They zigzag playfully between shrubs before disappearing beneath a fallen pine. Good! Small prey has survived the storm. A little farther along, another trail appears. Fox. His neat footprints weave confidently across the snow before stopping suddenly beside a small hole. The hunters exchange knowing smiles. Breakfast probably happened there. Nature wastes little time after bad weather. The valley is already returning to its ordinary rhythms. You climb a gentle ridge overlooking the frozen river. Something catches your eye. Dark shapes. Moving. Reindeer. Not many. Perhaps 30. They are feeding calmly where fierce winds have stripped snow from patches of frozen grass and lichen. The storm has accidentally helped them. Strong winds removed obstacles that softer weather would have left untouched. Nature destroys. Nature provides. Often at the same time. Several hunters quietly observe the herd without approaching. Today is not the day for another large hunt. Information comes first. Knowing where the animals survived the storm matters almost as much as hunting them immediately. The herd seems healthy. That is encouraging. Farther north, another familiar sight appears. Mammoth tracks. Fresh. Enormous. The great animals also survived the storm and continued their steady migration. You place your boot inside one giant footprint. It barely fills half the space. The comparison makes you smile. Some scholars believe mammoths possessed remarkable abilities to locate food beneath deep snow using their trunks and powerful feet to uncover buried vegetation. Their movements may even have created feeding opportunities later used by smaller animals following behind. Historians continue investigating how different Ice Age species influenced one another across these vast ecosystems. Every footprint may have carried consequences, beyond what anyone noticed. As afternoon sunlight brightens the valley, something unexpected happens. A flock of small birds appears. Not many. Only 6 or 7. They dart between bare branches, chirping briefly before continuing southward along the river. The sound feels astonishingly cheerful after weeks dominated by wind and silence. Children notice immediately. They're back. Perhaps they merely paused during migration. No one knows. The birds keep their own calendar. Researchers studying prehistoric climate often rely upon pollen, animal remains, and ancient sediments to reconstruct changing seasons. Human observers, however, likely notice simpler signs first. The first returning birds, longer shadows, melting icicles, the smell of damp earth beneath snow. The calendar lived outside, not inside books. You kneel beside a sunny patch of exposed rock. The surface feels almost warm compared with surrounding snow. Not warm enough for bare hands, just different. That tiny difference reminds you how slowly the world changes. Winter never disappears in a single day. It loosens its grip one careful finger at a time. Back at camp, the atmosphere feels lighter than it has in weeks. Someone hangs freshly washed hides outside for a short time beneath bright sunlight. Another person opens the shelter entrance wider than usual, allowing stale, smoky air to drift away before evening. Fresh air enters. The shelter seems brighter. Even the fire burns differently beneath improved airflow. One child proudly announces discovering water dripping from the edge of a snow-covered rock. Everyone walks over to see. Only a few drops, nothing more. Still, it feels important. Water is moving again. An elder nods thoughtfully. The valley remembers spring. The words settle gently over everyone. No one imagines winter ending tomorrow. That would be foolish. Yet hope rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in droplets, a little more sunlight, a flock of birds, fresh animal tracks, water beneath the ice. As evening approaches, the western sky glows with colours absent for many days. Soft gold, faded pink, hints of lavender spreading above the distant glacier. The entire valley seems wrapped in quiet light. Dinner tastes especially satisfying tonight, not because the food is different, because everyone's spirits have quietly lifted. Around the fire, stories continue as always, yet laughter comes a little more easily. Children stay awake a few minutes longer, watching sparks drift upward through the smoke hole. Outside, the stars return one by one. The storm has washed the sky perfectly clean. You settle beneath your familiar blankets, feeling something difficult to describe. Not certainty, not celebration. Something gentler. Confidence. The hardest weeks may not be finished. More storms will almost certainly come. Winter still rules the land beyond your shelter. Yet today the valley whispered a promise. The sun lingered slightly longer. The birds returned. The water moved. The mammoths walked on. Life never stopped beneath the snow. It simply waited with extraordinary patience for the light to find it once again. Section 19. The oldest footsteps in the valley are invisible. Snow has covered them. Wind has softened them. Time has quietly carried them away. Yet they are still there, not beneath your feet, inside the people walking beside you. The morning begins like many others. Smoke rises gently from the shelter. The fire glows with steady confidence, and the smell of warming marrow broth drifts into the crisp winter air. Children help carry small bundles of firewood while hunters inspect yesterday's repaired spear points. Everything feels familiar. That is precisely the point. Survival is built upon familiar routines repeated until they become instinct. Today, however, there is less urgency than usual. No hunting party prepares for a long journey. No storm darkens the horizon. Instead, the elders decide it is a day for remembering. You follow them beyond the shelter to a small rise overlooking the frozen valley. From here, the land stretches outward in every direction, interrupted only by scattered pines, winding rivers locked beneath ice, and distant hills fading into pale blue light. The oldest man stands quietly for a long moment. He does not speak immediately. He simply looks. The children wait. Eventually, he points toward a narrow gap between two rocky hills. Never crossed there after heavy snow. His voice remains calm. The wind hides deep drifts. The youngest children stare toward the gap. It looks harmless, beautiful even. That is exactly why the lesson matters. Nature rarely advertises danger. Yuna's slowly committing the place to memory. No map records it. No carved sign warns travelers. Only voices preserve the knowledge. Historians generally agree that oral traditions formed the backbone of survival in prehistoric societies. Information too valuable to lose: safe crossings, dangerous cliffs, reliable springs, seasonal migration routes, and hidden flint sources, passed carefully from one generation to another through repeated stories and lived experience. Memory became infrastructure, long before roads existed. The elder points again, this time toward a line of dark pine trees beside the frozen river. When the ravens gather there. He pauses. The wolves are usually close. One child asks what. The old man smiles. The ravens know before we do. Simple, clear, easy to remember. Across countless generations, observations like these become woven into everyday conversation until they seem obvious. Yet every lesson was earned. Some probably cost lives. You continue walking together across the snow. The children scatter, briefly chasing one another between small drifts before being gently called back. Even play becomes part of learning. A little girl stops beside several rabbit tracks. She kneels, looks closely, then announces proudly, "The hare came from there." She points confidently. An older woman crouches beside her. What tells you that? The child studies the tracks again. She hesitates, then notices tiny sprays of snow thrown forward from each leap. Her eyes brighten. Oh! The lesson settles naturally into memory. Nobody needed to lecture. Observation teaches itself. Nearby, two boys compare different pieces of flint gathered during yesterday's walk. One stone rings clearly when tapped. The other produces only a dull sound. An experienced hunter listens briefly. Which would you choose? The boys answer together. The ringing one. Her nods. No further explanation. Good stone announces itself. Researchers studying traditional hunter-gatherer cultures often observe that practical teaching relies heavily upon guided discovery rather than lengthy instruction. Elders ask questions, demonstrate patiently, and allow younger learners to solve problems whenever possible. Many archaeologists believe similar approaches likely characterize prehistoric education. Exactly how lessons were organized remains uncertain. Wisdom leaves few fossils. Round midday, everyone returns to camp carrying something. Not large, not heavy. One child finds a straight branch suitable for future arrows or spears. Another discovers smooth river stones useful around the hearth. An older girl collects handfuls of dried grass exposed by the wind. Each contribution matters. Nobody returns empty-handed. Contribution begins early, not because children are forced, because belonging feels good. The afternoon brings another gathering inside the shelter. Outside, the temperature drops once again as the sun begins its brief journey toward the western horizon. Inside, warmth wraps gently around everyone. The fire crackles softly. An elderly woman unties a leather pouch filled with small carved objects. Not ornaments today. Teaching tools. Tiny animals fashioned from antler. A mammoth. A horse. A reindeer. A wolf. She places them one by one upon a stretched hide. The youngest children immediately recognize most of them. Then she quietly rearranges the figures. The reindeer go where? One child points toward open ground. The wolves. Behind them. The mammoths. Near the river. She smiles. Not always. Then she moves the figures again. The lesson continues. Without drawings. Without books. Only imagination. Some scholars believe storytelling, combined with physical objects, may have played important roles in transmitting complex knowledge across generations. While direct archaeological proof remains limited, carved figurines discovered throughout Ice Age Europe suggest these miniature works may have served purposes extending beyond decoration alone. Perhaps they inspired stories, perhaps they aided memory, perhaps both. The firelight dances across the little carvings. Their shadows grow enormous against the shelter wall. One boy suddenly asks the oldest hunter a question. Were you ever afraid? The shelter becomes quiet. The old man chuckles softly. Many times. The children seem surprised. He continues. The brave hunter is not the one who never fears. He gently places another piece of wood upon the fire. The brave hunter remembers what fear teaches. Silence follows. Comfortable silence. The lesson requires no further explanation. As evening settles across the valley, another story begins. This one tells of an exceptionally harsh winter many years before. The snow had fallen so deeply that even mammoths struggled to reach buried grasses. Food became scarce. Travel became dangerous. Yet one family remembered an old valley where warm springs kept patches of ground open throughout the coldest months. That memory saved everyone. Whether every detail happened exactly as told hardly matters. The lesson certainly does. Memory feeds people, just as surely as meat. Modern archaeology repeatedly demonstrates that prehistoric humans occupied many landscapes over astonishingly long periods. Certain valleys, caves, river crossings, and hunting grounds were revisited, generation after generation, suggesting enduring knowledge of local geography. The land became family history. Every journey added another page. Outside, the stars emerge above the frozen wilderness. Inside, one of the children carefully repeats today's lessons almost like a game. The ravens watch the wolves. The ringing stone makes better tools. The deep drift near the rocky gap. Everyone smiles. The knowledge is already taking root. The fire burns steadily while adults quietly exchange glances. No celebration, only satisfaction. Another generation is learning. Another winter's wisdom will survive. You settle beneath your familiar blankets and watch the children gradually fall asleep. Tomorrow they will remember some lessons perfectly. Others will require repeating. That is expected. Knowledge grows through seasons, not moments. As the flames sink lower and the shelter fills with slow, peaceful breathing, you realize something remarkable. The strongest shelter your people have ever built is not made from mammoth bones. It is not stitched together with the sinew. It cannot be buried beneath snow or shaken by storms. It exists inside every story carefully told, every question patiently answered, every mistake gently corrected, and every child willing to listen. Long after this winter ends, long after today's footprints disappear beneath countless future snowfalls, those invisible shelters of memory will continue carrying your people safely across the frozen world one generation after another. Section 20. You wake before dawn one final time. The shelter is quiet except for the gentle crackle of glowing embers and the slow breathing of those still asleep beneath layers of reindeer hide. Outside, the world waits beneath another clear winter sky, but something feels unmistakably different. Not dramatic, not sudden, simply lighter. For several mornings, now you have noticed the sunlight arriving just a little earlier. The shadows no longer stretch quite as far across the valley by midday. Even the wind, though, still cold enough to numb your fingers, carries a softness that was absent only a few weeks ago. Winter is still here, but it is no longer growing stronger. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and step outside. The snow beneath your boots has changed. The upper layer remains frozen, yet beneath the morning sun it gives just slightly before becoming firm again. Tiny droplets hang from the southern side of a nearby rock where yesterday's light lingered longest. The drops are small. They matter anyway. The valley seems to notice them too. Air raven circles overhead before settling atop a mammoth rib near the shelter. In the distance, a fox trots confidently across an open slope, pausing only briefly before disappearing among the pines. Somewhere beyond the frozen river you hear the faint call of migrating birds carried by the cold air. The sound is easy to miss. You do not miss it. Everyone emerges from the shelter one by one. No one speaks immediately. There is nothing to announce. Nature has already done that. One of the oldest women smiles quietly as she turns her face toward the rising sun. It stays longer. Only 4 words. Everyone nods. Across Ice Age Europe, surviving winter was never about defeating nature. It was about enduring long enough to welcome its gradual change. Every additional minute of daylight meant slightly warmer afternoons, longer opportunities to gather food and renewed movement among animals that had spent months conserving precious energy. Hope arrived slowly, just like the sun. You walk toward the ridge overlooking the valley. From here, the frozen landscape stretches farther than ever before, sparkling beneath golden morning light. Snow still blankets the plains, but scattered patches of exposed grass now appear where the wind and sunshine have worked together. Life is returning, quietly. A line of reindeer moves across the valley below. Not hurried, not desperate. Their winter coats still hang thick around their bodies, yet their steady movement carries a confidence absent during the fiercest storms. Calves remain close beside older females, copying each careful step across the uneven ground. Families continue, as they always have. Far beyond them, barely visible against the pale horizon, enormous shapes drift slowly northward. The mammoths. You smile. They survive too. Their long migration continues across the frozen continent just as it has for countless generations before yours. Historians generally agree that seasonal cycles shaped every aspect of Ice Age life. Human communities adjusted their movements, hunting strategies, shelter construction, and food storage, according to changing weather, migrating herds, and available resources. Exactly how far different groups traveled each year remains uncertain. Some may have covered hundreds of miles, others likely returned to familiar valleys season after season. The landscape offered many possibilities. Memory guided the choices. Back at camp, everyone prepares for another day of ordinary work. The smoking rack still holds preserved meat. Fresh flint waits beside the fire to become tomorrow's tools. Children gather kindling while laughing over footprints left by a curious fox during the night. Nothing extraordinary happens. That is precisely what makes the morning beautiful. Extraordinary lives are built from ordinary days repeated with care. One young boy sits beside the elder, who taught him to read animal tracks many weeks ago. Without being asked, he points toward the snowy hillside. Hare! The elder glances briefly, smiles. Yes, a little farther away. Wolf. Another smile. No correction needed today. The lessons have taken root. Nearby, a young girl carefully threads sinew through the eye of a polished bone needle. Her fingers move more confidently now. The thread slips through on the first attempt. She grins proudly. The older woman beside her says nothing. She does not need to. Success has its own language. Researchers studying prehistoric communities often emphasize humanity's remarkable capacity for cumulative knowledge. Each generation inherited not only genes, but also techniques, observations, stories, and practical wisdom refined over thousands of years. Firemaking improved, shelters improved, clothing improved, relationships improved. History often remembers inventions. It sometimes overlooks patience, As afternoon approaches, several members of the band climb the same ridge you visited earlier. No practical reason, simply to look. The valley stretches peacefully beneath a brilliant winter sky. Smoke rises from your shelter in a thin grey ribbon before dissolving into the cold air. You realize how small the camp appears, just one tiny circle of warmth in an enormous frozen wilderness. And yet, within that small circle lives everything that truly matters. Family, friendship, memory, skill, laughter, kindness, hope. Those things occupy remarkably little space, yet they outweigh mammoths. One child notices a single green shoot pushing through a patch of melting snow beside a sunlit rock. Not a flower, not even close, just a stubborn blade of grass. Everyone stops to admire it. The smallest signs often carry the greatest meaning. Some scholars suggest Ice Age people likely recognize subtle seasonal markers with astonishing precision. The first returning plants, changing bird migrations, softening river ice, and shifting animal behavior would all have signaled opportunities and responsibilities impossible to ignore. The calendar lived in the land itself. Every season turned another page. Evening arrives gently. The fire burns warmly inside the shelter, while another simple meal fills the air with comforting aromas of smoked meat marrow and pine smoke. Children drift towards sleep. Adults exchange quiet stories. Outside stars appear once more above the valley. They seem just as brilliant as they did during the deepest winter nights. Yet somehow they feel different now, perhaps because you have changed. You think back to everything this winter has quietly taught you. How to build shelter before storms arrive. How to keep a fire alive through endless nights. How to sew warmth into every stitch. How to preserve food when abundance briefly appears. How to read snow clouds, rivers, and stars. How to respect wolves without fearing them. How mammoths shaped human lives long after their footsteps faded. How children learned by watching. How elders remembered what books had not yet been invented to hold. Most importantly, how no one survived alone. The greatest invention of your people was never the spear, never the scraper, never even the fire. It was cooperation, the simple decision repeated every day to protect one another against a world far larger than any individual could ever face. Long before cities, long before kingdom, long before history recorded names, humanity had already discovered its greatest strength: each other. The fire gradually settles into glowing embers. Outside the frozen valley rests beneath a blanket of silver moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, wolves sing softly beneath the stars. A mammoth herd continues its patient journey beyond the northern hills. Ravens sleep with their heads tucked beneath dark wings. Beneath the snow rivers keep flowing toward a spring that will surely come. Not today. Soon enough. You pull your fur blanket a little closer. The warmth surrounds you. Your breathing slows. The sounds of the shelter become softer. The crackling fire. The gentle wind beyond the walls. The peaceful rhythm of sleeping companions. The Ice Age world, so vast and so unforgiving, gradually fades into quiet darkness, leaving behind only the comforting certainty that countless generations before you found their way through winters just like this one, and because they did one day, unimaginably far in the future, someone would remember their story. As the last embers glow softly beneath a blanket of ash, allow the frozen valley to grow quieter still. Imagine the snow settling gently over the tracks left during the day, smoothing every path until the landscape looks untouched once more. The mammoths continue their slow journey, somewhere beyond the horizon. The wolves curl together beneath the shelter of ancient pines. Ravens rest silently above the valley, waiting for another dawn. Inside the shelter, the fire gives its final gentle crackle before becoming a bed of warm, steady coals. Around you, everyone sleeps peacefully, wrapped in layers of carefully stitched fur, breathing in calm, unhurried rhythm. The long winter has not disappeared, but it no longer feels endless. You have learned its language. You have listened to the wind. You have followed the tracks. You have shared food stories, laughter, and the quiet moments beside the fire. The frozen world has revealed that survival was never only about strength. It was about patience, about memory, about kindness offered without expecting anything in return, about many small acts of care repeated until they became a way of life. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine the stars turning slowly above Ice Age Europe, just as they did 50,000 years ago. Those same stars still shine above us tonight, connecting your quiet imagination with people whose names have been lost but whose resilience still echoes through history. Let the fire grow dim. Let the wind become softer. Let the valley drift peacefully into silence. and as sleep gently finds you, carry with you the quiet wisdom of those ancient winters. No season lasts forever. Every dawn arrives in its own time, and even the longest night eventually gives way to light. Sleep well.